Retro Hangover is supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Randall Quiggle, Tony G, Stud Still Smash the Milkman, Keith Gasper, Raging Demon, Mast Keaton, Disc Chimera, Ozzy Garcia, JC, Megan Caruso, Andrew Liguori, Lunchbox, aka The Disgruntled Gamer, Adam from The Good, the Bad, and the Backlog, Rick Firestone, Dave Jackson, Jenny E, Retro Overdrive, Soha, Parallax Puddles, The Emperor, Storm Beagle, Matt, aka Stormageddon, B. Ross and Van Fernal from Super Garbage Day, Gary Heather, the Retro Vixen, Eric Guess, Nomad from the Retro Wildlands podcast, Ash Event, Alan Bingham, Mike the Rep from Backbreaker Gaming, Ryan Player One, Low 5 Alex, Alt, Redder Dreaming, and Oh Me. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to the most recent episode of Retro Hangover.
Hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast where we selectively shock sense sonically so systems stay sound. This is Retro Hangover. I'm your co-host, Chris Copeland, with special guest, host of Tales from the Backlog and a Top 3 podcast, Dave Jackson. And, as always, your host, Shane. AI zombie controlled dick dragon Sultan.
You know, that could be a very frightening thing when you think about it. Zombie AI eggplant dragon. Who knows what could happen?
I think there have been games where that's happened, like high fantasy cyberpunk games. Zombie dragons.
Oh yeah, well yeah.
Zombie dragons, yeah.
Yeah, it's like Magic the Gathering is the first thing that comes to mind for me. But yeah.
There you go. Combine Shadowrun and Magic the Gathering with the zombie dick dragons, and you are going to fucking win.
Boom.
Isn't that called Netrunner? I think there was a game called Netrunner.
Hey, I mean, someone's going to let us know.
Isn't that Resident Evil 6? That probably happens in Resident Evil 6, right?
Oh, hey, yeah, that's the one with the
giraffe.
Yep, see, that's exactly where we both fucking went. We can never let that go.
Why? How could you let it go?
I mean, that giraffe certainly couldn't.
I mean, giraffe's definitely letting go. It's all being let go. But hey, before we talk about giraffe ejaculation, welcome back to the show, Dave Jackson. As on your show, I might say that you are a giraffe ejaculation enthusiast, but I'm not going to say that. I don't think that would be a polite thing to say. But I am glad that you are back to talk about this game. I have heard and through the grapevine that you might be a fan of this, so I'm very happy to see. I'm not going to see your thoughts. Hear your thoughts about our game today, which is System Shock 2. But welcome back to the show.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for the invite back. Thank you for talking about my interests with everybody at the top of the show, giraffe ejaculation and things like that. I mean,
it's important.
You're not going to say it, but you did say it. So I appreciate that you did say it, even though you're not going to say it. I appreciate it. But thank you guys.
I never would.
No, never.
I never would.
No.
No. Got to protect the species, though. So.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important. Shane, are you aghast?
No. I mean, where do you go from there? You know, I mean, the self-filleting giraffe is kind of a showstopper.
It's not self-filleting. It's definitely a person filleting the giraffe.
That's true. It's been a minute since I said that. At what point is this reference going to be obscure enough that people are going to have no fucking idea what we're talking about?
10 to 15 years.
Okay, great. This will age beautifully.
Yeah.
As it always does.
Yeah,
of course. I can tell you where we can go from this, though, Shane.
Oh, okay. Well, do tell.
As we are wont to do, we like to talk about the games we have been playing lately. And as we are also wont to do, as tradition dictates, our guest always goes first. So, Dave, what games have you been playing lately?
Well, you're not going to believe this, but I've been playing a lot of games. And one of the games I just finished recently, Chris, I know you are a fan of this developer, and Shane might be a fan of Red Candle Games, makers of Detention and Devotion. And I just finished their new game, Nine Souls, a couple days ago, which is a very, very difficult game, but it's a very good game also. It's for those who don't know, Red Candle's known for doing horror games, and this time they made a side-scrolling, brightly colored, hand-drawn, beautiful Metroidvania with a brutal combat system inspired by Sekiro, primarily. And so it's a hard game, but for this studio's first attempt at an action game, it's really, really good. So I just finished that. Fans of Red Candle games, this is also quality. You should absolutely jump in on Nine Souls, unless you really hated Sekiro, then probably don't play Nine Souls because you're not going to like this either. It's like the same combat system almost, based on parries and deflect. You have 3 different kinds of parry in this game. That's how sicko this combat system gets. But the story's really good, as Nine Candle usually does. So, and as a Metroidvania, it's fun to explore things like that. So I just finished that up. That's the main one. And I'm also playing the Mad Max game from Avalanche Studios. I picked that up after watching Furiosa in the movie theater, and then a couple months later, I'm actually getting around to playing it. That's a really good time. If you play a bunch of story heavy games and you're doing analysis on podcasts such as Retro Hangover and stuff, and every now and then you just want to punch some dudes in the face. And that's what the Mad Max game is all about, is punching dudes in the face, watching cars explode. It's a lot of fun. Those are the main 2. I'm playing a bunch of stuff, but I don't want to talk too long. I could go for a while, but those are the main 2.
Hell yeah, brother.
Both of those games sound extraordinarily interesting to me, just because, I love Devotion.
Yeah.
I like Detention. And Red Candle Studios is one of the studios that I hold in the highest regard, especially all the shit they had to go through with China and Winnie the Pooh over there.
Yeah.
Whenever there's an opportunity to support them, I try to. And hopefully I'll be able to support them here in the near future. I'm looking forward to that. Never played Sekiro, so I don't know what I feel about that. Also, Mad Max, I've heard that's really good and underrated. And I think I first heard of that from Listoff.
Yeah.
Ryan and Brian over there.
It has the reputation as being one of those 7 out of 10 games, right? So fun games with big flaws. And the big flaw in Mad Max is the story is an absolute 0. The Mad Max movies, I feel have plots that are somewhat compelling and big outsized characters. And they just don't really have that in the game so far, what I've played. It is the plot of the Mad Max game in the 18 hours that I've played so far is they stole Max's car, so you need to build the ultimate car. That's the story. There is nothing happening along the way. There are no subplots. That's the story. But you're in the world of Mad Max with all these psychos out in the wasteland and stuff like that. So if you like the world and world building of Mad Max, and you like to watch cars explode, it's a no-brainer. You can get the game for $4 now. So go play it.
That's fantastic.
I feel like that description makes it seem like it's Borderlands if it wasn't trying so hard.
Oh, this game's barely trying as far as having characters and stuff go. So Mad Max has the War Boys are these crazy, dudes, and Immortan Joe and all these other big characters. They're all psychos, and that's portrayed well. It's not like people are nice in the game or something like that. Everyone's a maniac in the game. But if you need a plot or sympathetic characters or something like that, this game has none of that. Absolutely nothing. It's just explosions.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Like you sold me at punching dudes and explosions.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm totally ready for like a brain dead game.
Absolutely.
I will get to that when I talk about the games that I've been playing lately, I guess. Before I get to the games I've been playing lately, Shane, what have you been up to?
Well, speaking of brain dead games, and I will fully admit that it's actually one of the reasons that I like the genre so much, and that is action RPGs. They're my comfort space. Diablo 4, some folks may know that a certain expansion, Vessel of Hatred, just dropped, and with it the new season. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. The new class, the Spiritborn, is tons of fun to play. It's super fluid. Like, they actually do a really genius thing with the evade move that every class has. But I never really bothered to use it much because it's not really necessary. But they actually incorporate it into the skill set of the Spiritborn such that, like, it encourages you to use your evade more often. It's roughly equivalent to, like, you know, like a dodge roll or whatever. But with the Spiritborn, you do this sweet, like, fucking cartwheel thing that just, like, shoots out a bunch of these, like, spirit eagle feathers that, like, cause, like, armor penetration on anything that's around you. And it, like, there's this really great flow to the combat, and it's just so satisfying. I'm really enjoying that. I actually just finished the campaign for the expansion today, so I was pretty happy about that. Now I'm just working on like the seasonal stuff per the usual, but there have been a ton of changes to the game. I think that Diablo 4 is probably in the best place it's ever been, and I'm very happy about that. I'm glad that things turned out for the better, because there were some times there where things were looking kind of rough and I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but they seem to pull it around. So I'm happy with that. But that's been the majority of my time. I fired up a game called Mega Loot on Steam. I got it on sale recently. So on paper, I should love this game. It's basically like a very stripped down loot RPG, hence the name. Like it's quite literally just like a character sheet with a window of, like, it looks like an old school like dungeon crawler, like wizardry style or something. You just go through waves of enemies and you just collect a bunch of loot and equip yourself, and you get better stuff and rinse and repeat. And there's some other little mechanics that kind of work in there as well, but that's really it. Like, it's the distilled essence of like the loot RPG. So I should love this. And for some reason, I just don't. I don't know what it is. I feel like there's something wrong with the gameplay loop. It's not as satisfying as it should be. And it almost feels like it's more difficult than it ought to be. And I don't know if I'm just doing something wrong. I've given it a few shots now, and like, I get a little bit further every time for the most part, but I don't feel like the sense of accomplishment. And again, unless I'm missing something completely, it doesn't seem like there's any permanent upgrades like between the runs, because of course it's a roguelike like everything else. So that's weird. Like, honestly, that's one of the biggest hooks for roguelikes for me, is like the permanent upgrades that you get that sort of carry through your runs, like that long tail of progression. And either I just haven't been good enough to unlock whatever the fuck that is for this game, or it just doesn't have it. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't know, weirdly kind of disappointed with it. And I'm not saying it's a bad game. I don't know, man. I'm just like not vibing with it like I thought I would. But that's pretty much it. I will say a quick shout out. I literally like 30 minutes ago, because I guess it just came out, but I downloaded on my phone. There is, speaking of wizardry, there is a mobile wizardry game now, and I've only played it for like 10 minutes, so I can't really speak to much, but so far it is absolutely first person square by square dungeon crawling like the old school, but with like better graphics and all that. I'm waiting for the inevitable fucking microtransactions. I don't know where they're going to come, but I'm sure they'll come out of somewhere, but I'll have more to report back on that later, I think. But that's it for me. I don't know. What about you, Chris? What you got going on?
Well, it was almost nothing. My brother came to town, and I didn't play like anything for a week. I didn't touch a single game. Nothing. So it was just studying for this exam I hope to take next week. And that was it. And then my brother left, and I was like, you know what? WWE 2K24 came out on PS Plus, and it's free. It's on the PS4. It's a PS4 version, so whatever. Like, the loading speeds aren't as fast, and there's some frame rate issues. But I've been watching Mike the Ref play it on Twitch for a while now, and I was like, this seems like my jam. I don't have to play the game. I can just make arrangements and book a show and have them fight each other, and then the game tells me how good of a job I did, which I don't agree with most of the time. I think it's a bad judgment of my judgment telling me I do a bad job. It needs to improve on that. I'll say that. But I have been having a blast with that.
Nice.
I created some characters. I created a character for myself who looks too much like a love child between Kenny Omega and Roman Reigns. If you don't know what that is, I'm not going to ask you to look them up and imagine it, but that's how I made myself look somehow. And I made a character for my brother, both my sons, and my wife. I forgot to draft my oldest son, and that sucks. But like, it's funny going through the GM mode, and like I finally was able to get myself the like US title, or I think, the United States title, after weeks of battling with this one guy who wouldn't get off my ass, named Wolfgang, and beat him in a steel cage. So I gave myself a title match and I won. That was cool. And of course, my wife is just yelling at everybody, demanding rematches and trying to prove that she's better than everybody and losing in the singles events. But she's a tag team champion with Io Sky, which is the important part. And of course, my son and my brother are tag team champions, and they just destroy everybody, except when my son, who he self-named himself Sugarfoot, and he wears thigh high stockings with an American flag on a very loose cut off T-shirt. I don't know if it means anything. Not saying it's bad if it does. He enjoys his character, but he is a tag team champion. And they win all the time as tag team champions, but he gets his ass beat by a cowboy whenever I put him up against the cowboy, and they have a rivalry. So I'm going to have to at the next PLE, they're going to have to settle this in some sort of stipulations match. So it's going to be, I'm having a great time with this. I wanted to have a run with my kid. I started the GM mode with my youngest son, and he just didn't seem interested after the first time. So I started my own save, and now I'm just like chiding him every single time he fights, and it's a great time. So I'm loving it, even though I'm not actually playing the game. It's just the whole entire managerial thing is, especially for a free game, technically free, right? Because I'm paying the subscription. But if I bought it myself, I'd probably be feeling more compelled to actually get into the nitty gritty and play it. But because it came with a subscription, I'm playing it the way I want to. I'm not really thinking about anything else. And man, I'm loving this. This could be my sleeper game of the year.
Hell yeah. I'm not a wrestling guy, but I did love the wrestling games on the N64. They were a lot of fun. I don't remember which one, but I had a couple of them, and I still have one for my N64. But I haven't played one in so long, and there are a bunch of wrestling games that got like the worst reviews in like the last 5 years or so. So glad to hear that this one's a good time.
I mean, it's all what you make of it. The most recent ones are, I know they had like a bad run for a while, a bad run. And I haven't played them really since the N64 either. And you're right, those are fantastic games. We played them not too long ago, I think, Shane, but at this time it's been a few years. But those are always fun to go back to. Like the N64 wrestling games, they're in a category in and of themselves. Yeah. They're brilliant. Like all four of them. Well, I mean, there are more than them, but there's only four that really matter. The ones that came from THQ. Everything else is Acclaim can die. Well, they did die, but RIP Acclaim. Anyway, Shane, we are here to not talk about wrestling games as much as I had fun doing so. We are here to talk about System Shock 2, which is not a wrestling game. But I think because you are the PC aficionado, I'm not going to say want again. I already said it like 3 times. That is this overblowing it. So how about you just carry us through this brief history of System Shock 2?
Look at you, hacker. Up at the pathetic creature of meat and bone, panting and sweating as you run through my corridors. How can you challenge a perfect, immortal machine?
Horror games as a genre in the late 1990s shared many common elements. Filled with jump scares and tense moments, these games aimed to instill fear or discomfort in players, but often stopped short of achieving much more. Narratives were typically shallow, rarely offering substantial content beyond establishing a basic atmosphere. However, some argue that System Shock 2, the game we are discussing today, took a significant step forward. It featured a narrative far more complex than standard titles like Resident Evil or Clock Tower, incorporating gameplay elements that allowed players to approach challenges from multiple angles. Development began in 1997 when Looking Glass Studios approached co-developer Irrational Games. While the developers were fans of the original System Shock, their initial intention was not to create a sequel. Instead, they aimed to develop a game that combined the feel of Ultima Underworld with the setting of System Shock, and a story arc similar to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. This concept led to the original project name Junction Point, which was separate from the System Shock series. However, developers often require publishers, and Electronic Arts expressed interest in supporting the project. EA, which held the rights to the first System Shock game and the franchise overall, requested that the new game be a sequel rather than a new intellectual property. The developers complied, adapting their storytelling to incorporate events from the previous game. System Shock 2 drew inspiration from various sources. The pen and paper game Traveler influenced character customization, focusing on military branches for character perks and statistics. Horror elements were also introduced, including player isolation with minimal NPC interaction, and vulnerability in the form of increased player susceptibility in enemy encounters. The game was released on August 11th of 1999 in North America and September 18th of the same year in Europe. System Shock 2 received universal critical acclaim, earning a 92 aggregate score on Metacritic. Critics praised its versatile gameplay as one of its core strengths. PC Gamer awarded it Best Role-Playing Game and Special Achievement in Sound for the year, while publications like IGN later hailed it as one of the best first-person shooters ever made. Despite critical success, the game was a commercial failure, selling only approximately 60,000 copies during its initial release, a poor performance even by PC game standards of that era. The legacy of System Shock 2 continued beyond its initial release, however. The game's director Ken Levine went on to create BioShock in 2007, which took the gaming world by storm and renewed interest in System Shock 2 due to their shared lineage. The game has since been released on popular PC gaming platforms such as Steam and Good Old Games. In 2019, a remastered edition was announced, though as of this recording, has yet to be released. And that is your brief history of System Shock 2.
All right, thank you, Shane. One of the biggest bits of information here that I take away, as I like to talk about after we get through this brief history, and I think I've heard this from multiple outlets. I think I've heard you talk about this before, Dave. I won't say where, but that this game was not meant really to be a sequel to the original System Shock. I like that's always talked about. I don't know the specifics, but I haven't played System Shock, the first one, at all. So I don't know how disconnected they feel, but that's generally a thing you hear from people when they talk about the two games is like, this is not really a game that feels like a natural sequel to the first game. It feels like a completely different beast, but it's just like a forced connectivity. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it just makes me think of so the stories are connected. Although the System Shock 2 story takes place far enough out into the future where they could kind of build up a new backstory before System Shock 2 started from the end of System Shock 1. I haven't played System Shock 1, but I have watched plenty of it. And from a gameplay perspective, they look like very different games. System Shock 1 is like a piece, like a mid-90s PC game UI nightmare experience from what I've seen of it. And System Shock 2 looks like a PC first-person shooter, basically. And you got some RPG stuff up on the screen and stuff like that. But that's the biggest disconnect that I can tell between the two, where you look at the two games and you're like, oh yeah, they did not want to do the same thing again as they did in the original System Shock.
Shane, you have anything to say to that? Because I have no grounds to say any sort of retort there.
No, that's actually pretty spot on. I mean, I think it's telling that System Shock got a remaster and we have yet to get one for System Shock 2, because out of the two, the original, I would argue, needed it much more.
Yeah,
well, isn't there rights?
The IP's been in just ridiculous IP hell this entire time. I mean, and it seems like different companies own the IP for different System Shock games. Like there's the company that did the remake of System Shock 1, and they might be working on the remake for System Shock, or the remaster for System Shock 2, but they're not the ones doing System Shock 3, which has also been announced. It's a ridiculous situation.
Sometimes, I mean, when you regard video games as art, as I think we all do, I think that's a pretty standard approach, especially within this field, right? I mean, I'm not saying anything controversial here, but you have a lot of stories in other media, whether it be movies or literature or what have you, that they reach their natural conclusion and they just stay isolated there. Do we need a System Shock 3? I don't think we do. I think it's just fine if we have 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Maybe find a way to make that available to others.
I mean, we'll get to it. This is one of my favorite types of game, so I won't turn my nose up at System Shock 3 because it'll be one of my favorite types of game. But do we need it? No, there's not many sequels or, third entries in game series that we actually do need,
Right.
Yeah.
Shane, you kind of suggested we might.
I mean,
we'll get to that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess we could get to that later. I would just say that is it needed? No, but they definitely left the option open.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later for sure.
Yeah, I won't be able to talk much about that. I'll explain why when I get to there. But before we get to that, we're going to have our personal experiences. I'm going to go first because mine is probably the lamest, which is I had heard about System Shock 2 for kind of the reason that was described in the brief history. Because when BioShock came out, I think it was a couple years after that, because I didn't get to BioShock initially. I'm not a big first-person shooter fan. Very rarely do I like a first-person shooter. It's just my kryptonite. It's I am so reticent to play a first person shooter. I dread doing so. By the time I played the first BioShock, I got to it. I liked it for the most part. I didn't beat it. I think I made it about halfway through and I was like, oh, this game is a survival horror. I may have been playing this wrong. And I just never picked it back up because I realized that there was a certain way to approach it that I was not anticipating. And I think I would have been fine, but I think it was man, I kind of missed out. I was still having a great time. I think BioShock is a fantastic game. I look forward to covering that sometime in the future on this show. Don't know when. Don't audit us, Keaton. Don't do that. I know you like to do that. I'm not making any promises, but I look forward to doing so. I thoroughly enjoyed that, especially because Steam came with a free remastered edition if you had the original. Anyway, so I started hearing about this game, System Shock 2, and all these critics and people on forums, especially PC gamers from back in the day, said that this game was incredible. And I looked into it, and it seemed like a game that I would thoroughly enjoy. So for a long time, I have been looking forward to playing this game. And I made it a point to put it on this year's schedule just because like I was highly anticipating how much I would have enjoyed it. Just because it seems like in a lot of ways it would be my jam. Not going to say any more than that. Yeah, this is one of those games I'd never played prior to this episode, but I heard so much about it. I was hotly anticipating getting to it. Dave, I'll go to you next.
Yeah, so this was also a game that I had like looked at and wanted to play for a while. And it's partly because of the BioShock connection. I played BioShock when it came out and I loved it. And I love BioShock 2 and I loved BioShock Infinite * when I played it back then and didn't think too hard about it. But I'm a fan of the BioShock series, and obviously people are very loud. You know, if you say you like BioShock, the System Shock 2 fans are pretty loud about like what the better game is. So that put it on my radar. But I always thought it would be too scary for me. Like I had heard that it was a horror game, and I had kind of seen maybe some screenshots of flickering lights in hallways or something, and I convinced myself it would be too scary. And I only recently got into horror games, like in the last like 2 years or so. So I didn't play this. The other reason I wanted to play this was, as I said before, the immersive sim is maybe my favorite type of video game. It's like this and From Software games. Those are like the top two easily. So things like Prey and the Dishonored series and Deus Ex, games like that, I eat those up. That is like pure gaming joy to me. And so to hear that System Shock 2 was super influential in that genre, to the point where people say that Arcane Studios' game Prey is basically System Shock 3 in all but name. That's like, I mean, you can't get me more interested in a game with something like that. So I kind of, like you, Chris, I just kind of like, I would like to play that someday, but there's so many games to play and I think it's too scary and I need a new push to play it. I played it for the first time a couple months ago as a part of a collaboration that I signed a pretty serious NDA to not talk about as of yet. So I played it for the first time very recently, and I'm glad that I did. And we'll get into why, but lots and lots of reasons why I'm really glad that I picked this game up finally.
Shane, how about yourself?
Oh, let's see. Yeah, kind of as I think alluded to earlier, I first played this. I haven't actually played through the entirety of the first System Shock. I remember giving it a go at some point. It was before the remaster happened, and I recall not getting too far. Mm-hmm. But that was actually after I had played the second one, because I was just like, I should go back and see what the other one was like. And but anyway, I can't pinpoint the exact time, but I will say I want to say it was somewhere around, I mean, it's what, 2024 at the time of this recording, so 15-ish years sounds about right, somewhere around there. Might even be closer to 20, honestly, but I do recall playing through this start to finish pretty voraciously. You got to remember too that this was right around like, Deus Ex time, so I was very much into this kind of game, especially being almost exclusively PC gaming at that time in my life. So this hit all the right spots for me. But I had forgotten. I mean, 15, 20 years is a long time, and then I came back to it to play through it now, and I'll save more of my thoughts for later on kind of how that unfolded. But yeah, that's kind of my history with it. I remember seeing a lot about it in PC Gamer magazine because I subscribed to that, so I got that every month. It was a highlight of mine to get that in the mail and read through all of the reviews and upcoming games and whatnot. And so I had seen the press on it, so I was pretty stoked to get a chance to play it. So there you go.
So I gotta ask, because I hear a lot of Deus Ex when System Shock 2 is talked about.
Yeah,
like how similar are these two games?
Pretty
like they're kind of similar in the way that they're these RPG first person shooter hybrids where you can kind of like build a character in the way you want.
Yeah.
But Deus Ex has a lot more freedom in how you accomplish things than System Shock 2 does. You're not crawling through vents in System Shock 2.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I would say that I think more mechanically they feel very similar. And obviously we'll get into more of this in the gameplay, but they are both very much of their time in trying to incorporate RP, like fairly, not, I want to say heavy, but fairly, lengthy, involved RPG type stuff into an FPS, which wasn't something that was happening all the time back then. And as a result, it's maybe not exactly the most like intuitive thing. And they have that in common.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll save that for gameplay. But in terms of the narrative, I think like this is how I'm going to segue into plot and writing here. And this is coming from someone very limited PC first person gaming experience here. I think this is right around the time you're getting the hotbed of narrative first person shooters. You had Half-Life come out the year before. We already mentioned Deus Ex, which came out in 2000, which would be the year after. And this is kind of sitting right there in the middle. Now, I did not complete this game. I made it about halfway through. I made it to the, quote, twist, where you find out who's talking to you, so on and so forth. And I do also want to say, if you have not played System Shock 2 and you do not want to be spoiled, I am not going to hamper, and I don't believe Shane would either, anybody on this show from discussing spoilers. So I go recommend, if you do not want to be spoiled, go play the game or whatever you want to do with that. But we're going to be taught no limits on spoilers, no governors on spoilers whatsoever. So I'm pretty much going to turn this over to you in terms of the plot writing, because both of you have made it all the way through. How do you really feel about this game's storytelling in terms of being contemporary and in terms of just overall? Dave?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I think that I don't want to say a lot of people, because not Shane from what we learned, but me and you, Chris, are coming to this after playing BioShock, which is where some of Ken Levine's tricks got famous, but they're the same tricks in System Shock 2. The reveal of Shodan is the exact same thing that happened in BioShock. The kind of like pitting of two separate ideals as choices in front of the player, but not actually making either of them attractive. That's a Ken Levine special, most notably seen in BioShock Infinite. So it's interesting coming back to this one and seeing the things that I've seen before in the later games from this same, writer, director in System Shock 2. The difference is I think that the sci-fi concepts of what these two forces are, Shodan and the Many, and the way they tie together. You learn the history of what happens with the Many. If anyone's listening and doesn't know, the Many are this parasitic hive mind that is taking over the crew members on the station. And so you see these, they call them hybrids. The enemies that you're fighting are these almost zombified, but kind of still in there crew members that are joining up with this hive mind, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes not. So like learning about all of that stuff, I think is really cool. Like as a sci-fi story, I think this is cool. And I really enjoyed learning about that. I loved listening to the crew logs. Anyone who played the BioShock games, they do audio logs as a primary form of storytelling. Instead of making you read a bunch of stuff, you can listen to somebody's last moments as you dig through trash cans or whatever you're doing in the game. So I really love listening to those. It's just when you start talking about like the philosophy of System Shock 2 and the philosophy of Shodan, the philosophy of the Many, we have each choice bringing you like because they both want you to join them. That's what's going on. Both offer a loss of individualism to join either a super powerful AI in Shodan or a collective in the Many. When you start getting into that, I don't think it's very good, but I think the sci-fi ideas are really cool. So for the majority of the game, you're going through learning and listening to the crew members and stuff like that. I loved it. Just give me all these fucked up stories about the way these people made choices or were coerced into making choices and stuff like that. I loved it so much. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Shane and then we can talk about the ending here in a second, because that's part of the story and that needs to be talked about with System Shock 2.
Just really quick, if I could interject here, because I don't think I'm going to be adding much here. By the way you're describing it, because I really haven't gotten into the weeds much with Ken Levine, other than knowing that BioShock is a criticism of like Ayn Rand and her perspectives and her critiques. It might be more than that, of course, but that's just the very high level observationalist kind of view that I have from it. Is it kind of a critique of like individualism versus collectivism and just the negative forces? Is that kind of the message she's trying to drive home?
Yeah. So it seems like Shodan is the individualist force, the all powerful AI, the singular entity, and then the hive mind collective. That's obviously the collectivist angle to it. Mm-hmm. Both of them want you to give up yourself as an individual to either serve Shodan or join with the hive mind of the many. I guess it's a little bit more nuanced than just you have a highly individualist choice and a highly collectivist choice, and they both suck. Like, they're not compelling choices. That's the problem with the philosophy. The way it's shown, in my opinion, is I would like for them to at least give your character a reason to at least consider joining the many, but they're too far on the extremes to ever make you think that joining Shodan or the many would be a real choice. There's other games that do these kinds of things much better. Like the BioShock series is kind of like this too. They pit these opposing viewpoints, and it's almost like they want you to pick a side, but none of them are attractive choices, And I think that's how it is here.
I think I would make the argument that I don't believe that the choice is actually what was being driven at all. Like, I think the choice is irrelevant because, I mean, you don't get to make a choice, right? Like, that's not even part of the gameplay. Like, you're just kind of railroaded through the story, which, for the record, I use railroaded. It has a negative sort of connotation. I don't mind it. I like straightforward storytelling, so that's not an issue for me. But if I was going to take a stab at it, I would say that the driving, like, sort of philosophical point, I guess, that I think is trying to be made here is that both options are terrible, and that it's sort of exploring those themes of, where is artificial intelligence going? What are we doing with like genetic manipulation, and where's that going to lead us? And like, what is like the nature of humanity? Like what is the nature of man, in this sort of like technologically advanced future, because this is set in the year 2114, I think it is.
Yeah, far future.
So I think that's really the driving narrative there. It's more making a commentary on like, hey, like, this is potentially where we're headed, and doesn't it look like there's no good option? I mean, that might just be like a highly like cynical take on it, but that's kind of the vibe that I got.
Almost like the game itself is highly cynical.
Yeah. Both of these are, I mean, especially with Shodan and how this AI went out of control in System Shock 1. It took this heroic effort to like destroy her and send, this infected area of the space station out into space. But Shodan survived, and Shodan's got all these other creations that she's been working on. And that is what becomes the many, is a creation of Shodan's that spun out of her control, just like Shodan spun out of the people's control. Like, that stuff is good for sure. I guess I prefer, if a game is trying to make like an ideological point, that I would want to see the benefits of any of the points involved. Instead, they show you the cartoonishly evil Shodan. And I mean, I don't say cartoonishly in a bad way. Shodan's an awesome villain.
Yeah.
And then the many is this hive mind where you literally, your flesh joins with this lump of flesh covering this spaceship, if that's the way you choose to go. And so like, you're right. They're not giving you a choice, but they're presenting it as a choice because these other crew members made the choice to join the many. Maybe they had a worm inside their head that was making them make the choice or something, but they made the choice. So it's a game where your character rejects these and makes the individualist choice, like the human choice. I'm going to retain my individualism. And that's like one thing that people attribute to being human, like you said, Shane. The way that they show that at the end is it's so goofy and stupid. Like, you can't take this choice seriously, right? I mean, that's how I feel about it. I think this game has a pretty infamous ending for those who have played it. And it's because it's so tonally different from everything else in the game that it's hard to take seriously, even though if you like write it out and analyze it, you could be like, yes, they're rejecting the call, the draw of power by joining Shodan, or they're rejecting the choice to be free of all the pain of this mortal coil by joining the many. Like, there are other stories that I like that do those kind of things well, but in System Shock 2, you just get hit with nah at the end of it. It's the dumbest fucking thing ever. It's so dumb.
Oh, yeah. So given that there was a significant amount of time, between the last time I played through this and now, that had completely exited my memory. And when I got to that point, you're just like, you're facing off against Shodan and she's all like, trying to make this last ditch effort of like, no, I'll give you power. It'll be great. And you expect like, well, first of all, you're basically a silent protagonist, right? Through like the entirety of this game. And the only fucking voice line that you get is just you going full like Duke Nukem on her with a shotgun and just being like, nah, and blows her away. And I'm like, what the fuck was this? Where did this come from?
Dude, it's the way it fits in my head is this game came out in 1999 and it was being developed in the late 90s, right? I think they just thought we need our character to sound cool at the end of this when he's telling Shodan to get bent. What does a late 90s idea of cool sound like? It might just be this guy going, nah, and then shooting this screen with a pistol. And the other part of this, by the way, is it's a first person game. You have never seen what your character looks like until the end there. Oh,
God.
And
that's dumb as shit.
The reveal of what your character actually looks like in System Shock 2 legitimately, like, I was speechless when I saw how they designed this character. You have the nerdiest, not nerdiest, you have the dorkiest looking character to ever man a first person shooter. And that includes Gordon Freeman, who is an actual nerd.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
When you start the game, they give you the option to be like a IT professional is something you can do. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
I've never seen an IT professional that wears goggles with the world's worst bowl cut the way that this System Shock 2 character looks like.
It's the style of the time.
It could have been.
By the way, Shane, it might not be too late to put that protagonist's face on a t-shirt and say nah beneath it, because my son has like something with a dog that says nah beneath it. I think we can make money off this. Let's get on that. I think that's a good idea. I think that's an idea.
Let's see how long we can skirt copyright law. Yeah, let's do it.
I mean, they can't figure out who owns the rights, so who's going to sue us? Fuck them.
Yeah.
Take the Jim Sterling approach.
Exactly. James Stephanie Sterling.
Before moving out of talking about story, and I don't know how much longer we wanted to talk about the story, I did want to just talk about Shodan as a villain, because Shodan is on the game's cover, and the image of Shodan is one of the most famous like video game images. You'll see it everywhere. Once you know what it is, you'll be like, yeah, I've seen that so many places. It's like every Discord server I'm in, it's somebody's profile picture is Shodan. The way Shodan like talks to you throughout the story, the way she has this just contempt for you as this being beneath her, but you have to work together. And at certain points, you have to work for her, furthering what she needs, because it's the only path forward, I thought was really, really good. So for like, things about the story that I don't think are great, I think Shodan lives up to the hype. All those best video game villains of all time lists I've ever read, Shodan's on every single one of them. And I think she lives up to the hype.
I also think it's funny because she's like on the fucking box and like all of the material. It almost makes the twist a little pointless, because you're just like, I mean, yeah, she's going to show up, right? Like at some point, like they wouldn't put her on the fucking box otherwise. I mean, it's, I know that's kind of taking away from it a bit, because I still think it's a pretty good storytelling mechanism. I enjoyed it, even though I kind of saw it coming, right? I feel like we probably ought to give at least a little bit, background on the plot here, since we kind of just jumped right into sort of like critiquing.
Yeah.
If you guys will indulge me for a moment, I'll kind of set a little bit of the stage here just so folks are kind of on the same page. But
let's do it.
I kind of touched on the fact that this is in the far-flung future, right? 2114. Basically, you as the player, you get to choose a military career path as your sort of like character building options, which I actually really like this. It would have been very, very simple for them to just sort of like, you know, just give you a menu and be like, here, build your character, like, you know, D&D style, roll some stats and fucking let's go. But they chose to make it much more immersive. And I really, really appreciate that choice because it does really kind of get you into that headspace where, yes, you are essentially just choosing stats, but the way that they give it to you, I think is pretty great. And so you pick from like one of 3 military branches, and then you kind of set off on your journey. And like about 5 or so months later into your sort of deployment, you get a distress signal from the Tau Ceti 5 planet. And there was a rescue team that was sent to investigate some like strange eggs that were inside of an old ejection pod. And it turns out that those eggs contained parasitic worms that infect said team. And that is what integrates them into that sort of psychic hive mind we were talking about called the Many. And so you wake up from cryo sleep on the med deck of the Von Braun, the ship that you were on. And of course, you, as the storytelling trope of the ages, are suffering from amnesia. And you've got this sweet ass, but dorky as shit looking cyber neural interface. And you are almost immediately contacted by one Dr. Janice Polito. And she kind of serves as your guide in the beginning, telling you that you need to go and figure out how to meet her up on deck 4 of the Von Braun. And so that's kind of how things kick off. And then as you sort of progress through the ship, you encounter like crew members who've been infected and mutated by the Many. You also get communicated to by the hive mind, like telepathically, trying to get you to join with them and that sort of thing. And then, of course, we were alluding to all of this, right? But like the big twist there is that Polito has actually been dead this whole time. And bum, 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 it's Shodan. And she was impersonating the doctor this whole time to get you to do her dirty work. And yeah, and then you kind of go from there. Now, what I thought was funny, right, is it's, how do I phrase it? It's almost like Darth Maul, right? In episode 1 of Star Wars. It's the first thing that came to mind. And I'm talking about Xerxes, which is the computer for the Von Braun. Because initially you assume, especially if you played the first game or have any idea of kind of what System Shock's going for here, you're like, oh, Xerxes is the main computer AI. He's going to be the big bad for this game. He doesn't do fuck all, like the entire time. And you're trying to, like, he's basically kind of in with the hive mind in a weird way and doesn't really do much. And then it just turns into like, no, it's actually, it was Shodan the whole time. So anyway, but yeah, so you kind of go through the rest of the game trying to figure out how to get rid of this hive mind because you're being told by Shodan that like, hey, these things got out of control. Like I made them, but like we need to get rid of them because they're a threat to basically the universe. So if we let them get back to Earth or whatever, y'all are fucked. So let's exterminate these things. And then in a twist of a twist at the end, she's just like, nope, actually, I was never intending on destroying the ship at all. And I'm going to utilize all this shit and the warp drive on the ship to manipulate it and kind of go and fucking basically play God and bend reality as we know it to her will using that like warp drive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the high level of kind of what's happening. There's a lot of little stuff in between there, but
yeah. What's cool about that is like the acknowledgement that obviously, you know, Shodan's evil, whether you played the first game or whether you just, you know, you have a functioning brain, you know, Shodan's no good, but the greater threat is the Many, because that's just going to keep growing and taking over everything. So you have to work with Shodan for most of the game, is you taking orders from Shodan, and you know that what you're doing is helping her and that helping her is bad, but you don't really have a choice. All the while, like, she gives you your rewards for finishing quests. She gives you your skill point items and stuff like that. She just shows such contempt for you. It's great. Like, when you finish something, she's like, oh, yes, fine job, I suppose. Here's your cyber modules, you piece of shit. Now go over to deck 3 and do this other thing for me. The trash needs emptying. And you go over and do that. And Shodan is able to do that because of this like neural link that you have or something like that. There's a couple points in the game where you can like rebel against Shodan a little bit. Like she'll tell you not to go in this cargo bay, and you can go in there and you can learn the truth of how Shodan betrayed the crew. And you find some cyber modules in there. You're like, fuck yeah, skill points. Hell yeah. Mm-hmm. You pick them up. And when you leave the room, Shodan yells at you for like disobeying her. And she takes your cyber modules away. And you're like, oh man, she's powerful. This is bad. Like, it's just a little reminder from the game. Like, yeah, the evil AI is actually very strong. You should be afraid of her too. I love the way that they have you work alongside Shodan as you're trying to take out the many. Cause like the other thing is the many is literally swallowing one of the ships that you're on. And then Shodan's going to try to use the warp drive to become God at the same time. So it's all bad happening on the ship here.
Yeah, you are her useful little insect. You know, I have to wonder how many like Dommy mommy kinks were born from this game.
Hopefully a lot. There's nothing wrong with Dommy mommy kinks.
One can only hope. Step on me, Shodan.
Yeah, even though she has no physical form. I mean, that's what Rule 34 is for, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the problem I had kind of with the storytelling, and it kind of bleeds over to the gameplay in a bit. And I think you already mentioned it. It's like that twist. And that's where I made it to. I made it a little after the twist. I made it a little past that 4th floor where you have to clean out all the like bio waste material and all that stuff like that in order to progress. And I didn't meet the additional characters that came later, the actual humans. I did not meet them. But like when I started the game, I didn't even think I was talking to a crew member. I immediately thought maybe it's just because I came to it so much later. I assumed, and it's probably because of what other people are saying, I assumed I was already talking to Shodan.
I had no idea. For the record, I was shocked by the reveal. I thought Xerxes was going to be Shodan, so I was all in on that.
I don't know what I necessarily thought. I had the feeling just because of the nature of the game and like, oh, this is part of this and this is part of that I was being manipulated by whatever was talking to me, like and telling me what to do. Like I already had a feeling that was happening. I'm not saying it was necessarily tipped off, but sometimes when you get vibes, video game vibes, you've been playing this long enough, especially for a game that's 25 years old and other games have borrowed from it, or there were games before it that may have influenced it in some way. Either way, right? Like you see things coming sometimes in one way or another. Like not everything is on its face honest, especially with the setting, everything like that. So like when the reveal happened, I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, I don't know. I don't care what you're doing. I don't want to hear your story, Shodan. You're a crackpot and I'm just kind of at your mercy. So what am I doing next? Because I either work with you and survive against like this thing that's trying to kill me nonstop, or you're going to kill me. So what do I do? That's kind of the position I got at that point. Like the player's in a no-win situation. In my perspective, that takes away from the player engagement. It didn't for either of you, but for myself, it's like what should inspire the character to keep moving forward? What should drive them to get to the ending at that point? If you know that the character that's telling you to do stuff is a massive piece of shit, and they're telling you to do stuff against things that are constantly trying to kill you, and you're like, you don't want either to win. You don't care for either side here. There doesn't seem to be any sort of light of hope at the end of the tunnel. For the player to be continuously engaged into finding an end resolution, what exists? Well, I couldn't find that at the midpoint.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair. I think, at least for me, I enjoyed being along for the ride. I think I was not as concerned with like the player agency of choice, although I think it is a good point to make. And I think if a game like this were to be created again, and you could argue this has probably been done, but I would be interested to see like how that would play out if you retold this story, but allowed the player to actually choose a side. Like that you could say like, no, you know what? Actually, I'm going to zerg this shit up. Like, yeah, hive mind me, bro. Like, you know, or the other way. You don't really have a choice at all in this, but that wasn't an issue for me because I kind of treated this like a lot of other sort of like, I almost call them like theme park games. That's a term that's used for MMOs a lot, like theme park MMOs, because they're not sandboxy. They're very like, okay, go here. Look at this cool thing. Look at this set piece. Isn't that awesome? Do this raid. Everything's pretty. Okay, see the next thing. Hence a theme park. I kind of feel like this is sort of the same thing, but I was like, okay with that. And as far as like the player's motivation at the time, I would think that like, you're aware, right? You're like, oh shit, like, okay, Shodan fucking sucks, but it seems like she wants me to get rid of these things that she created because that's obviously the more imminent threat. And like, maybe at the very least, you know, Shodan being an AI can be contained to like, you know, the Rickenbacker or whatever when you like move her over or something like that under the auspices that she's going to destroy the Von Braun to finally get rid of, you know, the many or whatever. And so I think it's like a calculated thing because you're right. You don't have another option. I mean, of course, the other option is just to blow your brains out, but that wouldn't make for a very good game. Right.
Yeah. No.
So your option then is like, OK, well, I guess enemy of my enemy. Right. And that's kind of where you go with it, I think, in the hopes that you can sort of deal with the Shodan problem like after. And you don't because you don't know
before. You know,
yeah. And you don't know that like her grand plan is that she's figured out how to fuck with the FTL drive on the ship to literally fucking change reality. Like that's not something you would have ever guessed. So
which does happen at the end of the game. And it's cool visually, and that's a nice little callback to System Shock 1, the area that Shodan recreates, turning the real world into the digital world is what she wants to do. And the area where she does that is the opening part of System Shock 1 in that med bay, which is a kind of cool throwback. And I don't know if Shodan's pulling from memory banks, something she holds close to her heart or something like that to pull that med bay back. But yeah, that stuff is cool. For me, it was like Shane said, like I almost don't question it in these linear, especially FPS games. It's a series of levels that you go through and you see thing, you shoot thing, you see set piece, you solve puzzle. This one's a bit more open than that because you have the ship at your disposal with all the floors and you can backtrack as much as you want to and all that stuff. But it is interesting how like you would go through this and you would think like, how is my character ever going to get out of this? And the answer is Shodan doesn't help you destroy the many. You do like a Legend of Zelda FPS boss fight, kill these little brain things and then shoot the heart 3 times or whatever. And then the many's gone. And then apparently all it takes to to bring Shodan down is shoot the screen that she's appearing on with a pistol. And then Shodan's gone. That was where she was living, apparently.
In the screen.
It's weird how you have those questions about like what agency does your character actually have? And it turns out like the solution to the problem is kind of shoehorned in to let you actually beat these unstoppable forces on both sides.
Well, and I think it's a very RPG take on things. I think that's, if I had to guess, I think that's where you're coming from, Chris, because you're very much in the JRPG camp, right? And so I think you're used to having a bit more agency on like, how am I going to progress this? How am I going to adjust my party? Like, what are these narrative choices that I'm making? And no. No? Okay.
Well, because
fuck me then.
JRPGs are very linear. I think when I come at it from this perspective, like if you're going to make it linear in this thing, I think like Soma does a better job of it. And like it's many years later, so I don't want to make it sound like it's like, haha, this game did it better. I think actually Soma owes a lot of its existence to System Shock 2 after playing it for a little bit. And I think Soma's fantastic. I also think like the Mass Effect series when it comes to choice and looking at the situation and what a player does, even though it may not have ended on the note that everyone wanted it to. I think like games like Mass Effect do it a little bit better when it comes to that. Now, that also came after System Shock 2. So like these are lessons that have been learned. I don't want to just be like, oh, this game didn't do it. But I think like looking back at it, I think it's a fair criticism, especially from what Dave was saying. And I don't know how it applies to the BioShock games in its entirety. But when you try to have two opposing ideologies, that the creator is like, well, these are both trash, but you're going to have to side with one of them one way or another. At some point, like for a person like me, it's like, what is the motivation to support what I know that position is complete shit?
So I don't want to say what game it is because it's a huge spoiler, but there is an indie RPG-ish game that came out in the last couple years. It's like very highly beloved, and I love it too. And it has a choice to give up your individualism and join a hive mind collective. That is a narrative choice you can make for your character. And in that game, it makes a lot of sense because your character's been through a ton of hardship along the way. And you might it might be an attractive choice to let go of all of that and just kind of dissolve into the ether, as it were. System Shock 2, like I've heard Ken Levine wanted people to see this as an attractive choice for that reason. You join the hive mind, you lose all the pain of an individual's existence, right? You might have all the pain of the hive mind, the collective. I'm not sure how that works, but that was supposed to be an attractive choice. But the way it's presented, it's not. And so when you have a presentation of two ideologies and then they say pick one, I want them to be somewhat attractive. I want to see the benefits of joining each side. System Shock 2 doesn't make you pick, like we've said, but it sure presents them as they want you to join them. They're both pleading for you to join them. And I think they want you to see the benefit of remove all the pain of existence with the many, or join up with Shodan and experience what you think is going to be like being a god. Shodan's definitely not going to make you a god, but I think they want you to see that. And then the game is saying like, the point we're making is no, these are not the choice. The retaining your individuality, that's the message, is that the individuality, that's what makes you human. And that's the most important part here. And these choices are not worth it, despite how attractive they might seem. That's what System Shock 2 is trying to say to me at the end.
Yeah.
So it's weird. Like, I just don't think that it's an effective presentation of competing ideologies. And then BioShock Infinite does the same thing where they present these, conflicting ideologies, but neither of them are like attractive at all.
And I think you can do that, but it's the way that you tell it.
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to. Like, if you want to say both ideologies, like competing ideologies are dog shit, that's fine. But it comes down to the way that you tell that story and you weave that. Because I think that the player agency, especially in a linear type story, I think that's important.
Yeah.
That's my perspective. For a comparison's sake, like, another BioWare game that did it really well around the same time that you were on an episode for, KOTOR.
Oh yeah.
I think does it a lot better. It like the Sith present an argument to the player that has some benefits. Yeah. Ultimately, the Sith are evil and you don't want to join them, but it also says, hey, the Jedi might be fucking you too.
Yeah, there's truth to what both sides are saying, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it provides that compelling argument on either side.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of got me with the storytelling. And just to quickly kind of wrap this up and put a little bow on it, maybe it's going to go longer, but I do like the fact that there are audio logs. I don't like the fact that the zombies try to nom on you while you are listening to the audio logs. I think that makes them extremely difficult to listen to, especially if you get spotted by a camera and you get infinite waves of zombies and you just want to listen to how someone died. That is extraordinarily irritating, but they are nice. They do provide that backlog, and it is immersive because you do have to sit there, especially for you two who are Dark Souls fans who do not appreciate the benefits of a pause button. These are things that I could understand that both of you would enjoy. Yeah, I get it. Immersion.
So I think before, okay, hold on. Let me backtrack. Audio logs real quick. I agree. I really like them here. And we have to remember time and place, right? This is back in like 99. And so it wasn't quite the worn out, tired video game trope that it is now. I actually kind of take the opposite stance on them. Like, yes, it is kind of aggravating to get blasted by a shotgun hive mind zombie while you're trying to listen to somebody talk about, their missing loved one, which we'll get to in a second. But I really like the implementation of this because, historically prior to this, most games, if they're going to tell a story like in universe like that and not just like front load it all in the instruction manual or whatever, you're just going to get a bunch of text dumps that you need to sit there and read. Now, the text is there if you want to read it. It's in the log, but it's really nice to be able to like pop open your UI, go to the log you just picked up, click play, and then close the UI and just keep kind of going along so you can listen while you're continuing to play. Like at the time, that was something that was fairly novel. So that's really nice. And I actually like that. And interestingly, and this kind of weaves into the last piece of the plot discussion that I do want to have because I think it's important. There's more to the audio logs than just like background exposition, which I think is really cool. There's actually a whole subplot that is going on that you are piecing together through the audio logs that actually becomes important at the very end of the game that you didn't really have any idea would be as important as it turned out to be. So I don't know, Dave, you want to take that one?
Which one are you talking about? Are you talking about the crew members that escaped on the shuttle, or are you talking about like the plot with leadership on the Von Braun?
Well, that one's a good one too, but I was talking about the couple that escapes.
Yeah, if you weren't listening to those, you might see those two on the escape pod and be like, who the fuck are they? Why is this the after credits scene in the game? If not to set up System Shock 3. But yeah, the audio logs don't just give you like background detail on how the many takes people over. Those audio logs are great. There are, like you said, there's continuing storylines, and it's not, I think I misspoke earlier. It's not that you're picking up everybody's last words as their audio logs. There's plenty of those for sure. But there are characters who you will pick up several logs throughout the game and see their evolving story, which a lot of times ends with them joining the many at some point or dying in a gruesome fashion, or both. So that's a cool thing about the logs in here. If you're really paying attention, if you're really listening to all the ones that you find. And I do agree with what Chris said. It's very hard for me to focus on the audio logs when I'm trying to fight while they're playing. And then a lot of times, like, I can't be fucked to open the menu back up and be like, oh, whose audio log was I just listening to? Was that Anderson or was that some other crew member? And go like try and find it or something. So it is hard to focus. But when you are able to focus and you can recognize repeat voices, recognize the next steps along somebody's progression, piece together that, there's like a whole nepotism storyline with leadership on the Von Braun, and that's partially why things are fucked the way that they are. That stuff is good. And audio logs might be overplayed now, but I mean, I'll still listen to an audio log before I read, with very few exceptions. I will take an audio log first as an option for exposition.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so just to cap that last piece off. So the two survivors that, if you weren't really listening to the audio log drama that was unfolding as you were playing, they are Tommy and Rebecca. And they are a couple who, through the audio logs, you've kind of determined are trying to sort of sync up with one another as like shit is going down to get the fuck off the Von Braun. They do actually eventually successfully escape in what I think is like one of, if not the last, like escape pod that's even available on the ship, which is really neat because you fucking see them take off and you're like, well, fuck me, I guess. But you see them take off and then you don't really hear anything else about them at all for the remainder of the game. And then you finish the game and you get this like, it's not really post credits, I guess, but you get this final sequence that you see this little short cinematic of Tommy kind of being on there. And they're saying that they received a message from the Von Braun and Rebecca comes sort of like into frame from behind him, and she starts talking in this voice that is very reminiscent of a certain maniacal AI.
Yeah.
Which, and also the way that she looks, she's got like the fucking Sarah Kerrigan hair Medusa shit going on, which pretty heavily hints at the fact that the AI has somehow still survived. Through Rebecca, I don't quite, that's where they lost me, because I'm not sure, unless I missed a key piece of something there. Like, I don't know if she's got like implants that maybe like,
yeah,
she lived in or something.
If it's not that, who knows?
Yeah, I'm not sure how they were going to, pull that one off, but the implication is that Shodan continues on.
Yeah.
I mean, she's always throwing these links at you in order for you to upgrade yourself. So who's to say those aren't like mini Shodan modules that you're just like injecting into yourself in order to become more powerful? Nothing saying that isn't the case. And
yeah,
it shows that she has the power to do so. So who knows? I certainly don't.
Yeah.
I think that does tie a good bow on the plot, talking about the ending there. And we've been talking about this for a while. Overall, it sounds like both of you are fans. I'm more middling on it. I think we all have our criticisms of it in terms of the storytelling. I think this is a year after Half-Life, which really kind of shook up the way that storytelling was done in first-person perspective games, first-person shooting games in general. So, I mean, like, there's a lot to be understood there as well. It wasn't something that was necessarily commonplace, especially something like storytelling was probably more exclusive to RPGs. And this is what this game aimed to be, the Ultima Underworld influence there. But ultimately, like, this game has found itself as a first-person shooter, and much more probably in the line of Half-Life, probably to probably the designers and the developers' lamentation. I don't know. I would imagine they probably don't want that. They probably want to be more associated with RPGs.
Well,
but getting into the game.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, if they wanted to be more associated with RPGs, they dropped that really quickly, because BioShock is not an RPG. It's a first person shooter. So
not at all.
Yeah.
But let's get into the gameplay here, and I'm going to let you roast me. So I'm going to air my grievances before both of you just destroy me and tell me how wrong I am. I already said I don't like first person shooters. I don't like them. And this is a game from 99. Now, when we played Clive Barker's Undying, Shane, we made the comments that game had just not aged as well when you compare it to more modern shooters, and that Halo kind of was that breach point that it was the kind of like the first modern generation shooter. Like, you had Doom, and then you had a bunch of games in between Doom and Halo that were trying to figure it out. And then once it got to Halo, the people, like, developers were like, okay, we understand it. And I do think that from my experience here, this is why I put this game down after like 7 hours of trying to get it. Like, this game is a game of its time. It has a really cool opening. I love the way that you like assign your character stats. I like how you choose your class. I love all that. I think that is incredibly immersive. I think that is fantastic. But then once you get into the meat of the game, I think that you're talking about controls that are relatively janky. It's definitely a time capsule of what was happening at that time in terms of just raw gameplay. I understand, like, you're probably going to get countered with, like, there are multiple solutions to do things, and that's completely understandable. And I think that is a positive aspect of it. But in terms of how you approach enemies, how you attack enemies, the way it sets up the environment, there's almost this expectation that you are supposed to save scum. And there's almost an expectation that you're going to have to restart this game in order to respec your character in a way that fits your play style. And both of those things I do not appreciate in the slightest. And I think that's also commonplace in a lot of CRPGs of that era, where it's like, hey, play a little while. Oh, you're having a tough time? Okay, go back, respec. Now you know how to play it. Then you're going to enjoy it more. But get a good feel for the game first. And I get that from a lot of not just PC games in general of that time. And I think it's shit. Now, PC gamers, they love it. And if you go in with a guide that tells you kind of what happens and what you do with it, you can probably have a good time. But if you're going in blind as like more of a console gamer like myself, I think you're going to have a lot of difficulties with this game. And this is something I've heard from a lot of people when they say, well, I first played the game, I picked it up, I played it for a little while, I put it down because I didn't like it. And then I came back to it later and then I really enjoyed it. It's like, well, yeah, because now you know what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And I even did the same thing with Mass Effect the first time I played it. I put it down because like, I have no fucking idea what I'm supposed to do with this game. And then like I picked it up 6 months later, like I really love this game. Does that mean it's really intuitive? Absolutely not. It's not intuitive to like your average gamer unless you sit down and you really get into the nitty gritty. And I think that's actually a flaw. I think games should be criticized about that. But in terms like, I will say this too. I'll say this openly. I was probably given some bad advice because people were like, put everything into hacking. And then I did that. And then I realized I couldn't kill anything. And I could also be killed very easily. So then like I saw more advice from the broader internet and it was like, if I restarted this game and knew what I was doing, I could probably have a lot more fun with this. Be a Marine, get all the gun specs and put a little bit into hacking and then like be able to get the weapon repair, just be like a full blown Doom shooter. And I think I would have a great time with that. But I just didn't feel inspired to do that for kind of the story reasons before. But like that's kind of my issue with it. Dave, I saw you had a point you wanted to bring up, and that's where I'm at with this game in general, so I'll just turn it over to you here.
Yeah, so first of all, regarding the advice to put stats into hacking, maybe it wasn't phrased well, but this game you do have to put a certain level into hacking because the final boss requires hacking. So if you can't hack, you are fucked in the final boss fight. And that was
awful.
It's terrible. It's a legitimately indefensible game design decision to give you RPG choices to build your character and then get to the final boss. Who knows how many save slots you have, but get to the final boss and be like, oh, you didn't get to level 4 in hacking? Well, get fucked. You know, that's terrible. There's another part where you have to hack a vending machine before that for a main quest thing. I didn't have any money to hack the vending machine. And so I opened up the console and gave myself enough money to do that. Anyway,
did you not have the recycler?
I did not have. I couldn't recycle enough to get enough money to buy the thing that you had to buy.
Gotcha.
So all that to be said, that is a legit indefensible game design thing where you have to put points into hacking because the final boss requires it. That sucks. So that's why people, when you say, I'm going to start System Shock 2, they're like, okay, make sure you put points into hacking because that's why. The other part about it is you're absolutely right. This is an old ass computer RPG where you can make a bad build and you can make a build that sucks. And, I didn't because I'm a god, obviously. No, I didn't because
you are the Shodan of man.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever that means.
the showman, one might say.
I know basically like this is a game where I can make a bad build because it's an old computer RPG and they're all basically like this. So I just put points into guns early in the game for survivability and made sure to get hacking to a certain point because I did know about that before I played. But this is a game where you can screw yourself over with your build and have to restart. And it's not just computer RPGs. The other side of System Shock 2's gameplay is this is a survival horror game. And survival horror games also give you these, runs where you just use too many resources. Think of like the first Resident Evil game. You start that game, you use too many bullets, you're like, fuck, I can't kill anything. I have to start a new game and conserve resources better. So this is also a survival horror game with limited resources and limited inventory space. And I actually think it's really good as a survival horror game for a while until you get enough grenades late in the game, you can just blow everything up. Resident Evil games are kind of like that too. Mm-hmm. It is a game where you can have false starts and have to restart. And it's partly because of its genres, and it's partly just because, you can screw up your build in like every 90s computer RPG. It just kind of comes with the territory.
Really quick, another thing you forgot was stealth. It's also a stealth game.
if you want it to be.
Unfortunately.
To conserve resources, you probably should be stealthing around a little. I didn't put points into stealth, but it has a system for it. You should be trying.
You better kill those cameras or else it's Metal Gear Solid for the original.
Oh my God,
MSX.
that is another indefensible, like, did they just not think that through? It's bad in Metal Gear Solid to have to sit in a corner and hide for real minutes and just watch that timer tick down. Yeah. But in System Shock 2, we just got to stand in a doorway and hit things with the wrench as they run through the doorway. And you just do that for 4 minutes until it's over.
It's horrible.
It sucks.
I mean, okay, yes, I'm saying I don't think that's a great design at all. But like, am I the only one out of the three of us that like does not have a problem with save scumming? Like I
save scummed a ton. Yeah, I did.
Oh yeah, but I feel like, and I could be wrong. I feel like Chris was kind of bringing it up as like a negative of like, ooh, bad save scumming.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, and it might just be because I'm so used to playing PC games from this era and previously and whatnot that's just sort of like a common thing. But like I don't know, man, it didn't really bother me. Like, and I never, if I ran into something or I was like, oh, I fucked that up, like I'll just quick load. Like it's just, I don't know, it's not a big deal to me. Like
a lot of the later immersive sim games like the Dishonored's and stuff like that, they have quick load on the main pause menu, so like they know it's part of it. My main save scumming in System Shock 2 was anytime I set off an alarm, I would quick load because I would rather redo a couple rooms of the game than sit through that alarm system. It's terrible. Yeah. And I would quick save before every hacking I did, because the hacking minigame is also terrible. It is inscrutable. I played the entire game, could not tell you how the hacking minigame works. It just...
What? Okay.
I know how to, you click around and you make connections. How many connections? Yeah. Who knows? 3. How do I make connections?
It's only 3.
Who knows?
It's always 3.
It's not always 3. Sometimes you have to have like 5 on harder locks.
Oh, well, like, that okay. This might be a function of the difficulty you played on, because I played on easy.
Oh, okay. It could be. Yeah. Mine, it was varied on like the standard difficulty that I played on.
Mm-hmm.
But like sometimes there are legitimately not 5 nodes in a row that connect and you just have to pay to restart or set off an alarm. So yeah, quick load. Anyway, I don't need to spend too much time talking about the hacking.
Well, that's like, you're like, am I the only, when Shane, you asked, you're the only one who had a problem with quick loading or save scumming. That's my problem with save scumming, is that save scumming is used to hide inherent flaws within game design. Yeah. That's what it's used for.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
A lot of times. Sometimes it's just a skill issue, right? Like, oh, I suck at this. I just need to keep reloading this until I can make it past it. But like when I hear like, I need to quick load because I got caught, and when I get caught, the game is terrible. I need a quick load before I need to hack because of but the hacking is a pain in the ass and can be terrible. Like, it sounds like you gotta save the game and prepare to quick load in the event that you know a gameplay element is going to be a detriment to your experience. And that's where my problem with save scumming comes up. Like, these things should, I'm not saying these things need to be the most enjoyable or automatic or easy or anything like that, but I don't think that's a good element of game design where you're like, let me save this real quick because if I fuck it up, I'm just going to load it. That's like saying like save states are a positive element of every single game. And some people will say it is, but I think if you make it to the end of any game and you say like you just use save states over and over and over again, you know that there's always room for improvement because the game was not designed to do that. So like if you're saying, well, I save scum the entire way, like, well, was the game designed to do that? Well, no. Okay, so what was it designed to do? In a very bad way. Okay, well, then there's flaws. And I think those flaws need to be like, hey, like, these are flaws.
Yeah. And the things that we've talked about so far, I think, are the absolute biggest flaws of the gameplay, which is the stealth and the alarm system and the hacking game. I think both of those are legitimately terrible. But there's like basically everything else about the gameplay that I like legitimately loved. I loved exploring in this game. I thought it was like immensely rewarding to find stuff. Because you always need money, you always need ammo, and this game just like Prey 2017 does, puts the cyber modules in the environment as rewards for exploring, which is like the best reward you can find in an RPG is skill points. That's like an awesome thing to find. So exploring, I thought, was really rewarding. And past a certain point, I would, like peek around corners to make sure there's no cameras or, monkeys that are going to shoot fireballs at me or something like that. I think there's like a really good feeling to exploring these levels, not getting surprised by stuff that you find. So like the majority of my save scumming that I did was if I set off an alarm, I'm not sitting through that alarm system. And before hacking, because I can't figure out the hacking mini game. So if I fail, I don't know why I failed. It doesn't feel like a proper, like in BioShock, if you fuck up the pipe dream mini game, how pipe dream works. You just couldn't do it in time. In this game, I could not figure it out. And so I didn't feel bad about save scumming around that. The rest of the stuff, though, like I think this is a legitimately like very good survival horror game for the first half of it or so. And then it's a pretty fun, if, old feeling FPS for the rest of it. I really love the ammo system in this game, how there are different ammo types for different enemies, and they make a huge difference using armor piercing ammo versus robots, versus using armor piercing ammo versus human enemies. Like in a game where you need to conserve your ammo, don't fire your guns too many times because their condition will degrade. You have to be aware, and on top of all of those things, finding the right kind of ammo. Maybe there's these turrets I need to blow up, finding some armor piercing ammo so I won't have to deplete all of my other stuff. I can just take them out with a few shots. All that stuff feels really great. So for, the way we started this with legitimate critiques of the gameplay and some of the systems that work there, I really, really liked playing this game. It was a lot of fun for me.
So if we're talking about gun degradation, I just want to set a line here.
Yes.
You both love Breath of the Wild's weapon system.
I think Breath of the Wild's weapon system is incredible for like 10 hours. And after that, it's a nuisance.
No, and I will say the major
weapon degradation is bullshit.
The major difference there is that Breath of the Wild doesn't allow you to repair your weapons.
Yeah, you just use them, toss them. Yeah,
that's fair.
So we just covered a whole fuck ton of ground.
Yeah, that's what I do. That's my bad.
No, that's good.
Yeah, no, we're good. But let me step back because I got some things that I need to touch on here.
Yeah,
going back to the character building. First of all, I want to say, Chris, you are 100% correct. Okay. I think you're going to get like clapped back at a lot less than I think you are, because as much as I love this game, and I really do, I also recognize that there are some very archaic design choices here that may put some people off. And that is one of them. Now, I genuinely, I did not have an issue with this because, I mean, you could say it's because I've played it before, but I'm gonna be honest, this was basically a fresh playthrough for me. Like 15, 20 fucking years. I don't remember shit. I went into it more or less fresh, and could you totally hose yourself? Yes, you absolutely can do that. You could be like, yo, man, I'm gonna put all my points in exotic weapons right off the bat. That's dumb as hell. But I mean, you could do it, So yes, you can do that. But I would actually make the counter argument that I feel like the game makes it fairly obvious what it kind of wants you to sort of go towards just by kind of playing through the first few like areas of the game. You get a pretty good sense of like, okay, so based on what I'm doing here and what I'm seeing, like, I should probably put some points into like just standard weapons because I'm not getting anything else right now. And it's not like I found a fucking grenade launcher right off the bat. So heavy weapons seems totally pointless. I'll throw some points in those so I can use these pistols and shotguns to better effect. These things are degrading, and it appears there's no way for me to do that without having some knowledge of repair or maintenance. So I should probably throw some points there. And then just general survivability. Like I went mostly with like a, endurance for the survivability, with like cyber for being better at like the hacking and stuff like that, because that adds an additional percentage, in the calculations, as well as strength for more inventory space, because I wasn't really doing much in the way of melee attacks. So that was neither here nor there for me. And I'll be honest, I've seen it. Like I've seen people do this, but I feel like this is one of those, like, once you've played the game through once, then do this as a challenge type shit. Cause like I've seen people go like pure like psi, just do nothing but like the psi abilities. It's possible, but I think that's like fucking challenge mode as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I think the more straightforward, like, you know what, make me beefier and let me shoot things good and do the hacking. I put almost no points in the psi stuff at all until towards the end, when you end up with so many points that you're just like, I don't know, I'll throw some points here, I guess. The only one I really picked up was like the grab one, because there are, as Dave pointed out, there's a lot of items sort of just like hidden around, and the game does really do a great job of like pushing you to explore. Like it wants you to explore every nook and cranny of this ship. And there are some things that you really can't reach unless you've got that like psi telekinetic pull thingy. So I did put like some points into that just to get that, and the psi shield for reduced damage. That was helpful too. But it's hard, right? Because like I see the argument of like, this game allows you to be just the worst and fail. And a lot of people would probably just be like, well, I guess I'm fucking out. I don't want to bother starting over again, which is fair. I think that's 100% valid criticism. And I'm not really defending that design choice. I think it is very much an artifact of its time. But I guess my counter argument for that is that there wasn't really a point when I was playing the game where I thought like, I think I made a bad decision, or like, I don't know what I should put my points into next, because the things that I had experienced up to that point sort of informed me as to like, well, this is probably what I should be doing to succeed. And for the most part, it was pretty spot on. Like there were a couple of times where I ran across something where it was like the research, for example, like we haven't even talked about that. You pick up alien parts as you kill things, and they pop up as like unresearched object. And if you put points into your research skill, you can actually figure out what they are, and you have to find the chemicals that it needs in these like chemical storerooms that are sort of throughout the different decks of the ship. And if you do that, most of those are damage bonuses. So like when you research something, and then it's like, okay, well now you know more about the physiology of this particular enemy, so you do 25% more damage. That's pretty cool. It's pretty rewarding. But I came across one, at one point where it was like, this needs research 5 or whatever, and I was at like 2 or 3, because up until that point I didn't know that there was like a requirement level for research. I thought it was just something that was like, it makes the research go faster, which it does, but there was nothing that ever told me like, oh, I'm going to actually need this. So I had this thing sitting in my inventory for like a few hours before I actually got a chance to do anything with it, because I didn't have the points. So it's definitely not perfect, right? But I don't know. I never really felt like the game didn't give me enough information to make like decent choices, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, I think this is where I'm going to praise System Shock 2 for all, as much as I hate it. It has... Well, in terms of its gameplay, it has replay value.
Yeah.
It has an enormous amount of replay value. Even though I was terrible at the game, even though I was having a bad time, even though I realized I had made poor decisions, there was this like itching feeling in the back of my head when it came to it. It was like, you could restart this game and do a lot better if you just make different choices and play it differently. And that's what I'm getting from this game. And even if you get really good, like let's say you find like the easy mode to get you through the game the first time, there's always going to be that feeling, because that the way you choose your class and the way you're introduced into the game, even like in general, like any sort of character creation CRPG game that you have, where you have so many variety of options in order of how to approach the game, especially with this one, you're always going to think, what if I chose psi? What if I chose psi abilities? What if that was my priority? Like, it's going to be a different gameplay experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially once you get good at one. Like you know there's going to be one to overcome.
Yeah, I mean, and the game honestly is short enough, relatively speaking, that like it's not that huge of an ask to do another replay. Like I think I took my time, and I think my playthrough this time was something like 15 hours ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so moving on from the stats and whatnot. So there are some other things that I do have some gripes with, and I want to point it out because honestly, I think it'd be a very easy fix, and I 100% missed something, so maybe Dave can keep me honest here, or it's another one of those like, well, it was a design decision when they didn't have more information to work with. I don't know. But the thing with the ammo, I love the idea. Okay. I really love the idea of how important the different ammo types actually are, because they are, as Dave pointed out. What I don't like is that I have to open up my HUD and click a little arrow to swap between ammo types.
Yeah.
While I'm in a fucking firefight.
Yeah. It should be a hotkey.
Yes.
And it would be a hotkey in any game made after this one.
Yep. 100%. And it boggles my mind because like you have a whole keyboard at your disposal.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I might defend it. I might be wrong on this one. Can't you have multiple different types of weapons and have different types of ammo on each one of those weapons, so you can like scroll on your mouse, so you can have
and
two
I did do that.
Pistols.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I did do that. Although here's the thing. Well, okay. 2 pistols that you have very limited inventory space. Okay.
Yeah,
so
inventory space and maintenance tools to, I mean, I could barely keep one pistol in working condition for like 3/4 of the game.
Sure.
Yeah. So I wouldn't say multiples of the same type just for the purposes of making ammo swapping easier, but I did do the thing where like, because I didn't put any points into anything as far as weapons go other than just like what did they call them? Small arms or whatever, just normal weapons for the majority of the game, until I got to a point where as you said, you eventually get showered in these toward the end of the game, the cyber modules. And so like, I just started throwing points into other things. So I'm like, well, I can use grenades now, or well, I can use this weird exotic weapon now, I guess. That's cool. But for the majority, I didn't see a reason to do any of those other ones. And so I was just rocking like a pistol and the shotgun for the vast majority of my playthrough. And I usually had them both on separate ammo types. So like I'd have the pistol on armor piercing, and then I'd have the shotgun on like anti-personnel rounds or whatever. And then that would be a quick hot swap. But yeah, like this sorely needed a hotkey for like swap ammo type. And that seems like it should have been such an easy thing. And I'm not sure why it didn't happen. But here's the other thing, by the way, fun. You everybody can laugh at my misery. I didn't even think about the fact that there was the little arrow button at the bottom right of the HUD to swap between ammo types. And so for like at least half of this game, I was going in and clicking and dragging the fucking ammo onto the weapon every time I needed to change it. And that sucked.
I did that the whole game. I didn't know what those arrows did. The whole game.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
If only had a big box with a manual that was like 90 pages long.
Yeah.
Tell you what to do.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really my kind of quibble with the UI, I think, but that was kind of it. Honestly, the rest of it I didn't have an issue with. Listen, man, I am a veteran of item Tetris, okay? So I have no problem with that. And I think that, sort of part and parcel with the whole survival horror thing of like, well, I need to decide what I want to take with me and what I don't.
Yep.
And quickly on that topic, because I brought it up briefly, right? But the chemicals. At first, I was kind of annoyed by this. So if you get those items and you start researching them, they'll tell you like, hey, you need, copper and whatever to research this. And it'll get to a point where it's like, okay, well, your research progress stops until you get this chemical and use it to continue going. But actually, I really came around on it because, and this kind of dovetails into my feelings about the game's like overall design, like the level design. I actually really liked the fact that this was so like in universe. Like when you find a chemical storeroom, and there should be one on every one of the 5 decks of the ship for the most part, you find a chemical manifest as like audio. It's not an audio log, it's just a text log, but and it tells you exactly which chemicals and how many are in that particular storeroom. And so you can go back and reference that in your little PDA or whatever of like, oh, I need this. It's in this one on this deck. And you can go back down there and grab it. This goes into my wider praise of, I think, how this is laid out, because I genuinely love how the level design of this game was done, because it's big enough that it makes the ship feel expansive and you do a lot of exploring, but it's contained and focused enough that you get this like very intimate knowledge of the layout of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say that I love backtracking, because I usually don't. And I will say that the last bit of this game does that, I think, a little too much, and it actually gets kind of aggravating. But having said that, traversing the different decks of the ship and having to go back to certain areas to do things or to find stuff, or going to these chemical storerooms, you do get this, like, I got to a point towards the end of the game where I could navigate all the decks of this ship almost by memory without having to pop the map open. And that really is a testament to how well designed it is. And also that the game is not holding your fucking hand. If this game was made today, I guarantee you,
it does not hold your hand at all.
No, but I guarantee you that you would have a little quest arrow on a compass and like a big like flashing button on the map of like, this is where you go next. And that robs you of that immersion, because you immediately don't give a shit about how the game is laid out. Like at that point, levels are just window dressing, and all you care about is following this arrow to your next thing, and you don't retain anything at all. And I think that does games a major, major disservice, because this one does not do that, but they give you enough information that you don't really ever feel like you're lost. Like they tell you, hey, you need to go to the engineering deck to this area or whatever. And you know, to get to the elevator, you can use your map. The maps have enough information on them that allows you to navigate intelligently. And that's it. You don't have something just telling you follow this path. You need to navigate. And by virtue of doing that, you do get this very intrinsic sense of like how to navigate around the Von Braun. And so I really, really enjoyed that. And so the having to go and like backtrack for some things, or having to go back down to another level to go to a chemical storeroom to get this one thing I need to research this item, was not tedious for the most part, because I knew how to navigate so well. And they also give you a bunch of like stim thingies. So like you could use them to like run faster for a short period of time, which helps with kind of, you know, doing some of that backtracking. Or if you put points into agility, your natural speed's faster. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out, because I do want to make a note of the fact that I think the overall design of the levels are extremely well done.
Yeah, and knowledge compresses the space in the levels too. So like I remember the feeling when they say like, oh yeah, go back down to medical or something, and it's one of the first levels in the game, and you think back to the first couple hours of the game and how much of a struggle it was to get through all those rooms on that opening deck that you start the game on. And then they're like, oh, we need you to go back down there for something. You're like, oh, fuck, that was so hard the first time. Then you go back and you're like, I remember this place. I remember where I'm supposed to go. It actually is going to take like 2 minutes to get to the place I need to go to. It's a really good feeling that like the best video game levels give you when you go back and you remember, like all those things are set in your memory because of how, I mean, like, frankly, how challenging some of those early levels in System Shock 2 are, to get to grips with how everything's laid out and get through the challenge of the enemies, the security cameras and all that stuff. So when you go back there, you remember where, oh, I remember this security camera here. There's a vending machine over here. I remember what hallways I need to go through. This is actually not a big deal.
Yeah. And it also kind of does the same thing that, of course, was beforehand, but the same thing that I really praised the original Dark Souls for too, is that there are several instances where you will be rewarded with shortcuts. The further you go in the game, you'll like unlock a door or unjam something or whatever. And then it's like, oh shit, that just made traversing this that much easier.
Yeah.
And I think the last point on that I want to make too is just again to the design of things is that the way that the different decks are presented, there's always enough unique, I hesitate to use the word set pieces, but I'll go with that just for a lack of something better. But there's enough identifiable like terrain or geography or what have you in the levels that you can use those as like mental and visual mileposts for being able to navigate. And so that again just goes back to how well these are designed, that like you can pop into a level of one of the decks and be like, oh right, there's that room with like that thing in there, and I remember that, and I know that if I go right from there then I can get to this thing. And it's really well laid out.
Yep.
The only counter I'm going to provide to that, I'm not saying you're wrong, and I think that a lot of people that would like this game point to that. I think that when it comes to like the green arrow pointing places and that being an issue, that wasn't a problem for Dead Space, and you were still encouraged to explore.
I don't want to turn this into the Dead Space podcast, but for all the praise that Dead Space gets for the minimalist UI stuff and the diegetic UI stuff, you do spend like your time running through those hallways just fucking hammering the R3 button to make that thing pop up on the floor like over and over and over and over again. So like how immersive is it really if that's what I'm doing? Other Dead Space stuff rules.
It didn't bother me.
Well, and I think that's the thing is like it's kind of to me it ends up being a crutch because like for both the player and I would actually argue for the game designers as well, because if you know that there's something in the game that's like, oh well, this is just going to tell me where to go, or hey, this thing is going to tell the player where to go next, I would actually make the argument that there's less incentive to make the levels memorable, because why bother? Like
I was just going to say, like, think of if we've all played Dead Space, I assume. Can you like think of how the layout of the Ishimura works? It doesn't feel like a real place. Whereas the ship in System Shock 2 or the ship in Prey, those feel like real places, and they're all spaceships. They're all space stations. They feel more like real living and working spaces that you can become familiar with. And it's somewhat ironic that Dead Space is the one that gets all the praise for having these immersive environments when I couldn't tell you how anything in the Ishimura is laid out. And I played that game a year ago, you know?
I think it's because of my JRPG background. When a game tells you where you're supposed to go, you go the opposite direction because there's usually something to find.
There's a treasure on the other path. Yeah,
exactly. So that's why I don't mind it. That's just my mentality. Like, I'm supposed to go this way. Great. I'm going to go the way that tells me not to go because there's going to be goodies.
Right.
Well, I think
that's my approach.
I mean, that's valid. I think that I would say that not having the green arrow to tell you like, hey, here's the main story quest is that, but like just like magnified, because you end up just being like, oh, I should explore everywhere. And you do. But the payoff is what's important. And as Dave pointed out earlier, it is rewarding. It's not like
you get treats.
Yeah, you get freaking skill points. So it's like, it's not like you're going there and you're like, oh, cool, I found 2 bullets. Great. Like you actually do get rewarded for exploring these little hidden areas and things like that. So,
yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have to move past the gameplay here just because the timeline, we are quickly approaching a longer episode for what it is worth. But I think it is time to move on to the graphics. And I think once again, I'll kick this off because I think what you said, like the immersion and the environments and everything like that, each deck to me, in terms of the graphical presentation, what we're talking about here, there are a lot of times I just got lost because I thought everything kind of looked the same. I didn't think the environments were all too detailed. I didn't think they were that great. Again, product of its time. It looks like a game from its time. It doesn't look that much better than other games of its time. There are better games in terms of graphical presentation of that time. It's not the height. It's definitely going to look like a polygonal 1999 ass game. I'll put it this way. It looks like a very, very good and cleaned up, clear version of a really good PS1 game. That's what it looks like to me. In terms of its graphical presentation. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No. Do I think it's bad? No. I just think it's it's okay. Like graphically, it's okay. It's not the best, certainly not the worst, but I mean, it's not doing, I wouldn't call it spectacular. It's not Crisis, right? But that's what you're getting with Dave. That's what you're getting, not Deus Ex. I've heard it looks better than Deus Ex. I need to play it, but that's what you're getting with System Shock 2.
Deus Ex also has just some of the worst face models. It's very funny.
Yeah.
I agree that a lot of the environments do look similar, but the spaces look different. So like the medical area looks different from the living quarters, looks different from the science research hydroponic area and stuff like that. That all looks different. And the cool part, because they don't give you the, the beacons telling you where to go, there is really good like signage on walls and floors telling you med bay this way, stuff like that. So if you need to find your way around a floor, you can definitely do that using what's provided in the game. I don't have a whole lot to add on to graphics other than for a game that is somewhat spooky and a game that I thought, before I played it was going to be really scary. What kind of stood out to me is this is an extraordinarily well lit game. When you think of horror games on space stations, it's very well lit. Everything's lit up. And I think that's one thing that if they did an enhanced edition or a remake or whatever they're going to end up doing, more modern lighting is going to add a lot more atmosphere to the visuals of this game. Because as it stands, just looking at the game, you might maybe ignore the corpses and the writing in blood and stuff like that. But other than that, you might not guess that this is a horror game at all. It's just like a sci-fi shooter. And that was what really stood out to me. Now, when we talk about sound later, then I'll talk about what, helps with that spooky atmosphere. But as far as graphics go, it honestly, like, other than those, the corpses and some environmental storytelling and the way the levels are made, I don't have a whole lot that actually stood out to me graphically here.
Yeah, I think tend to agree with both of you. Although I might make the argument that there is something unsettling about a very well lit area that is just abandoned. Like it kind of gives you a sense of like, well, something clearly happened here. I might even say it kind of gives a little bit of like almost a liminal space vibe of just like, well, there's supposed to be things happening here, but there aren't. And that's kind of unnerving. But anyway, yeah, I mean, the graphics are what they are. I will say, I think the only thing I want to add is that this game has not gotten a remaster of any kind. So as far as I'm aware, the version I played on GOG is still just the OG, unless they made some changes that I don't know about. But this game natively plays in 1080p. Like, that's pretty cool, especially for a game from this time. And it runs really well. Like, I was surprised that it runs buttery smooth and also looks still pretty decent. Like, I mean, yes, there's, you could, on some of the things you can count the polygons on one hand probably, but nothing looked really muddy or grainy or anything like that. Like something you would expect from like an older polygonal, like N64 ass game or something like that. Like everything looks very crisp and clean and it runs very well. And I didn't even touch on that in the gameplay because we talked about so many other things, but I will say that the game feel, like the movement and things like that, and the gunplay, for what it's worth, also all felt surprisingly good given the game's age.
Smooth for sure. I'm pretty sure I played this on Steam. I know I played it on Steam, but I'm pretty sure I played it in 4K. Just bumped up resolution as part of the Steam version. It definitely didn't look muddy at all, blown up on like a nice screen.
And if you want to go ham, I'm pretty sure there are some graphic packs out there that will update things too.
Oh, sure. Modders are here for everybody.
The System Shock 2 fans they've had 25 years to just go to town on this game.
Yeah, this is like a modder's heaven. Yeah. This is like where they're at. This is their stuff. Yeah, so I'm sure like you can do things to make it even look better, but I can't disagree with anything there. But let's get into the sound. Shane, I don't think I've had you start with anything so far. So how about you let us know what you think about this game's sound?
I think it's incredibly atmospheric. and I think it's awesome. I think it does a great job at what it does. It's not, perhaps unsurprisingly, it is not a game that's going to have like a real in-your-face soundtrack or anything, because it shouldn't, with the exception of a couple of pieces.
Really?
But yeah, I didn't think so. I mean, there are some cases. Well, okay, let's be clear that I never once triggered a camera, so maybe that also helps. But no, I actually, for the most part, it relies a lot on just sort of like the general ambiance, and I think the audio logs. I'm gonna be real with you. It's a little hit or miss. Some of the voice acting, not great. It's not great, and some of it's all right. The main character, Shodan, is great. No issues there. She's, appropriately threatening. And also all of the glitchy voice modulation shit that they do with her is also really cool. Adds a lot of effect there. Same deal with like the voice of the many that's kind of communicating to you telepathically. It layers several different like male and female voices together to sort of give that sense of, that there's more than one entity talking to you at once, but it's kind of the same entity, if that makes sense. So a lot of really great audio work there. But yeah, apparently you both disagreed with me about the soundtrack. So what did I miss?
Dave?
Well, first, I'll agree with you about the atmospheric sound design and the voice acting and stuff like that. And shout out to the little voice lines that the hybrids have as they're roaming around. Like you might be hacking a container or something and you'll hear a hybrid rolling up in the hallway, because like they move around the levels. They don't have like set spawn points. So you'll hear them a lot of times before you see them, and you'll hear them talking, and it's like, they're taken over by this hive mind parasite, but it kind of sounds like there's a person still in there because they're saying I'm sorry when they attack you. Like those things are really cool atmosphere wise. But this is I don't think this is a subtle soundtrack at all. This is an in-your-face electronic, like pulse pounding soundtrack for the most part. And it might be if there's like no enemies in the area that it calms down, but there seems to be always enemies around. So this is like one of my bigger criticisms about the atmosphere in this game, is that the soundtrack does not match the horror game atmosphere that everything else sets up, because it's this like I said, it's this like fast paced electronic music. Like it sounds like Half-Life music or something like that. And it's just blasting as you're playing a lot of times. You're like, what game is this? Like, what tone are they trying to set here? I mean, like the music is cool. I really like the songs, but as the soundtrack to a sci-fi horror game, I don't think it fits this game at all.
I wonder if this is a function of difficulty. I think it is, again. I think I'm starting to get the sense that I think this game ought to be played on easy. And the reason I say that is because like it's already pretty difficult to begin with. And in my playthrough on easy, because I'm just going to assume that there's like less enemies overall because of easy mode.
Probably.
There were like significant stretches of time where it was quiet. Like, so I didn't have the same experience.
I still had that too. Yeah. But like there is a lot of combat in this game, and
there is.
When I think of what this game sounds like, I have those like electronic songs in my head as what System Shock 2 sounds like.
Yeah. So I also played it on easy. And if you go to certain parts of the ship, certain decks, regardless if there's enemies there or not, it will play music like you're in the fucking Matrix movie. Yeah. And that's the idea that I'm getting from this, is that like, if it wants to be a survival horror, it's trying to present itself like it wants to be Doom in those moments. And it made me want to feel like, oh crap, like I got to move and I got to keep shooting stuff and I got to be like a boomer shooter. But the game is not that. It's not that at all. But it has soundtrack set and pieces that give the impression that it almost wants to be in those instances, which I think is a criticism in terms of its atmosphere. Because aside from that, I think you make some fantastic points, Shane, that and as you as well, Dave, like atmospherically, this game is great, especially if you're wearing a headset. Like the spatial audio is on point. You can figure out where all the enemies are, especially in the quieter parts, and what you hear and how twisted these entities that are in front of you actually are. Like, what are they? What are they thinking? Are they fighting for survival or independence from the hive mind? Do they really want to be part of it? And these are the things that I experienced in the playthrough that I had. Like, these are all great. The audio logs, I think they're voice acted appropriately for the time, for a PC game too. Like, the voice acting was far more intense on the PC than you would get in console gaming, just because of the space that you would be able to have on a PC versus a console. And they were doing this for a couple of years, but this is exactly where it needs to be. But I will point to the soundtrack, especially when a lot of people say play this and approach this and think of this like a survival horror. And all of a sudden you're Christian Bale in that one Matrix-like movie where you're shooting bullets at everything and doing spinning Equilibrium. That's the movie. Yeah. The other Matrix movie that people forget. That's what it made. That's what it felt like at times. It's like, well, what do you want to be? System Shock or System Shock 2? Do you want to be Techno Doom, or do you want to be sci-fi Resident Evil? And that's kind of where the sound direction goes at times. Not all the time. Most of the time, it is fantastic. It is very good. It is one of the heights of the game. But sometimes it does have that dissonance from what it tries, what it should be trying to do, in my opinion. And it just, I think, hurts the overall direction at points, which, yeah, it's unfortunate. But I think from what I've played overall, like, it's a net positive. But it does have times like, this doesn't belong here. As much as I love the music and I want to drop some ecstasy, to get some glow lights, turn on the black light, and just grow crazy.
I mean, I you know what? I that is valid. I guess I didn't even think about it because honestly, I didn't really notice it. I don't know. I guess it didn't bother me enough to like point it out. But now that you're mentioning it, I think that is a fair criticism.
It's weird. So it's like when I was playing it, it didn't bother me because I like the songs. But like, you know, when we sit down and put the critic hat on and you think like, does the music reinforce the type of gameplay and atmosphere that the game is putting forward? I don't think that it does at all. So it's a criticism of the game while being like, I like the music. I think the music's cool. I wasn't mad when the music was playing in the game. But for a game that wants you to be like this cautious, sneak around, check through containers, try to get the drop on these dangerous enemies, but you have this music blasting, like Chris said, it is a little dissonant for sure.
That actually,
I'm sure Ashton's going to put that in the background.
He'll put it for the entirety of this discussion, just 2 hours of boots and cats.
I need a whistle and start blowing it.
That does remind me of one thing that I didn't mention in the gameplay, so I will be brief. But the security hacking thing, I like the idea in theory, right? That, you know, hack the computers to like take the security systems down so you can get around them. That's cool. The timer on it, though, that had the same effect for me as the music did, where it was like tonally inconsistent, where the game kind of wants you to treat this as like a survival horror, like, oh, be careful going around the corner because you don't know what's there, or search through these boxes and be very thorough. But also you have 50 seconds to do it. Like that was a huge disconnect for me, because then it motivated me to just kind of like haul ass through hallways, because I'm like, well, I don't want to get caught, or I want to find the next turret or, you know, camera to take it out before this timer goes out, because I don't want to get shot in the face. That was weird. So I wanted to point that out, because that was actually one thing that did bother me.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're good talking about the sound here. And now it is time to get into our patron pontifications as we move our way towards wrapping this up. So what are the patron pontifications, you may ask? Well, it's when our patrons write in and, well, give their thoughts or pontifications. And you can give those by going over to our Patreon, which is part of our link tree, which can be found in the description notes. But if you don't want to go down there, it's just linktr.ee/retrohangover. Go to our Patreon, join for $1 a month. Make sure you're in the Discord, which is free. And just head over there. You'll see a section called Patron Pontifications. and put your thoughts there. I usually tag all the patrons and they put their thoughts there and we read them. And we are going to start this off with, I know this one. I think I'm going to skip the first one here. It looks pretty familiar. It's Dave's. He can read it if he wants to later, but I think we're just going to skip over it. I think you've heard enough of him today.
Had a lot of good points, but it's okay to skip it.
Yeah. Screw that guy. All right, moving on. We're going to go to Keith Gasper from the soon to be returning ? Main Quest podcast. And Keith says, I typed out a lengthy message here only to say System Shock 2 is far superior than the BioShock games and might be peak Ken Levine. Also, that man does not know how to end a video game to save his life. All right. Thank you, Keith.
All right. Well, next we have Backlog Adam from The Good, The Bad, and The Backlog, who says, never heard of it. All right, great. Thanks, Adam.
You know what? He loves Prey, so I think he should probably check this out.
Agreed. Yeah. Prey is System Shock 3 in all but name. Next up is Alan Bingham, who says, I've never heard of this game, but haven't dropped a single pontification since the Final Fantasy VI episode, so here it is. Also, shout out again to my best friend, Justin Crosby. Shout out to Justin. Hell yeah. He's now a listener of your show. You're welcome. Maybe I can talk him into being a patron someday. Lastly, thanks for continually killing it with this show. You guys manage to still endlessly entertain me, even when an episode is about a game I've never heard of or don't care about. This is still my favorite podcast to poop to. And that is, I mean, if that's not what we aspire to as podcasters, I don't know what is.
It's the highest praise.
I love the praise, but you failed on talking about System Shock 2. So no, flushed down to that. Honestly, thanks, Alan. Thanks for supporting the show for as long as you have. And thanks for getting more people listening to this. Definitely do appreciate it. And taking your time to make a pontification to praise us. It does fulfill my ego. I need it to be larger. I don't think it's quite there yet, but we can do it. All right, I guess it's back to me. All right, next is from Lunchbox, aka the Disgruntled Gamer, who has the YouTube channel called Thunderdome Gaming Society. And Lunchbox says, I played through System Shock 1 and 2 years ago. I don't remember much because I did play through them while I deployed, so that was 2005. I may play through the remaster that just released to refresh my memory. I know I like them because when BioShock was announced and Ken Levine was leading the team, I knew I had to play BioShock. Hopefully we will get some BioShock 4 news soon, but until then, Judas is planned to release next year, and that is Ken Levine's next project, so of course I'm playing it day one. Oh, and BioShock Infinite is the GOAT of the franchise. You're welcome.
I feel like that's a spicy take. I don't know.
Yeah, it wasn't a spicy take in 2013, but now it's pretty spicy.
And that's coming from somebody who likes Infinite, but I think the first BioShock's better.
Yeah, I remember BioShock Infinite came out. Everyone loved it. And then all of a sudden it was like a couple years later, it's like, what's one of the worst sequels of all time? It's like, what happened? Maybe one day we'll find out. This is not that show. I'd love to find out. I need to dive into that. I need to get back to BioShock, which I already said. But now it's our opinion on whether or not System Shock 2, not a BioShock game, technically, whether or not that game holds up today. Getting back to what we do traditionally, myself and Shane will give our opinions, and then we will let our guest have the last call, the final word. And we're going to let you know what we think of this game today. I think I'll go first on this one and say, because I do not like first-person shooters in general, and I will defer to a lot of the people that I have heard talk about this game. And yes, they probably are a little bit biased as well, but some of them have played it recently, and I can say the appeal is there. Like, if I wanted to go back and restart this game and respec my character and do a new class and approach it differently, I think I would have a good time. Is it without its faults? It is not without its faults. Like many a video game, there are very, very, very few perfect video games, and even those have things that you could nitpick at if you wanted to. So as much as I have bitched about this game, and I will bitch about this game, and I couldn't complete it, and I hated almost every minute that I played of it, I would in theory, love to go back and give this another go. And if that's the case with the game, I can't say it doesn't hold up. So yeah, this game holds up. Go give it a shot. Know that you should probably go in with a guide or a resource or something of that sort to let you know what to expect and how to play the game. Remember, these games used to come with like novels of instruction booklets. So that's probably the expectation that is there before you start playing. So I would say, yeah, System Shock 2 is a game that holds up today. Shane?
I am genuinely shocked. I did not think that was going to be the take. Yeah. So, all right, here's the thing, right? There are some things that don't age particularly well. And I think early FPS RPG hybrid mechanics are one of those things. I think we were still kind of trying to figure out how to make that work well. And so there are definitely some archaic design choices here that can be a little cumbersome. But outside of that, this game is fantastic. I'm just, I just got to be real with you. Like I want to level with the listeners because I feel like I've alluded to this before, but I don't think I've just straight up said it. But there are very few games that we play for this show that I sit down and begin playing for the purposes of being able to talk semi-intelligently about it on an episode where I think about when the next time is I can sit down and keep playing. This is one of those games. Like I fired it up again and I immediately remembered a lot about my first playthrough almost 2 decades ago, as far as like kind of, how much I kind of liked it, but it didn't really hit me until I started getting, a couple of hours into it. And I was just like, holy shit, I really like this game. I ate it up. It's the same thing I did when I played it the first time, where I was just like, man, I can't wait to sit back down and keep playing through this, because it's just really well made. Like the narrative, I think overall is pretty great. It tells a really compelling sci-fi horror story. Yes, it doesn't give you a lot of like agency as a player, but you're kind of there just sort of like experiencing the events that are occurring, and what it does, I think it does very well. Shodan is, one of the goats of video game villains for a reason. Yeah, man. Like if you can get past some of the little idiosyncrasies that this game has that are just sort of those artifacts of late 90s, early 2000s, PC game design, you have a real gem here. And like System Shock 2 is responsible for a lot of games that came later. Like we were talking about things like Dead Space and stuff like that. And you could argue that we may not have those games if it weren't for the likes of System Shock 2, because it informed so much of what those games would go on to do. So yeah, this game is great. It definitely has some warts, but I think don't use a full-on guide, because this is the kind of game where if you do that, you're basically ruining your experience. But I will say that maybe if you pick this up on like Good Old Games or something, usually they give you like a digital version of the manual. Maybe poke through that a little bit, or look up a PDF scan or something, just to get your bearings on like what some of these things are and what they do if you've never touched this before or are not familiar with this era of PC games like this, because it can be a little obtuse, and you may run into that situation that Chris ran into where it was just like, I don't know, man, I feel like I made some wrong choices and this feels bad. And that is a failing of the design. But I think if you, kind of have a little bit of pregame info in there, I think you'll be all right. And I think you're going to be in for a treat.
All right. Thanks, Shane. Dave.
Yeah. So it's interesting because this game has such a historical significance. Like Shane said, I thought, so like, does this game hold up as its own game? Historical context be damned. Yes, I do think it does. And there's clunky stuff, but like you're playing a game from 1999, expect some clunk as far as, a first person shooter with RPG systems before RPGs hit the mainstream like they did with like Mass Effect and stuff like that, especially like computer style RPGs. So expect that. But as a game, you know, survival horror, going around, looting stuff, collecting limited resources, managing your limited inventory, you know, maybe fighting with melee to save bullets, like all of those classic survival horror type things. I think that's really good in this game. And as you know, we've talked about, and Shane just brought up again, like, I think the story is fun to go through, and I have some issues with how the sides and ideologies are presented if they want you to empathize with them. But, you know, not to bring that back up, ultimately, that's a part of the experience, but it's not going to be a deal breaker for someone playing this. I do think as a play experience and as a story, it holds up. It's cool. It's a good game. It's one of those games that like it makes me think like, you could play this game in 2050 and the game design of the good parts of it are going to be good. Those things just stand the test of time, I think. So System Shock 2 does hold up, but it also does have the bonus, like Shane touched on, that this is such an important game for a lot of modern favorites like Dead Space, Prey, Dishonored. There's crossover between the development of this game and the developers of Deus Ex, which came out a little bit later. This is one of the pillars of this type of game, the immersive sim. And so like you'll play this, and if you like BioShock and Prey and others like Hitman, Breath of the Wild, if you play those games that have this type of like immersive sim type design, you're going to understand those other games a little bit better too, which is a cool little bonus when you play a game that has this type of influence, to feel like puzzle pieces are coming together about maybe some of your later favorites. I played this game and immediately was like, oh, Dead Space took that straight from this game. Portal took the design of GLaDOS, I feel like, kind of straight out of Shodan. They just made her funny. Shodan plus humor is GLaDOS. So a lot of stuff that I like about, you know, my more modern favorites made a lot more sense playing this. And when we talk about this game, does this hold up? Yes. But there's that bonus too, which is really cool. For some people, that historical context is enough to go back and play it if it's not a complete pain in the ass to play. And I think System Shock 2 is really good. So it's like a win-win on both of those.
All right. So that's a sweep that we got. I don't say it's a sweep. I'm used to saying that maybe in some of the other situations, but hey, we all think that System Shock 2 holds up today. There you go. Go check out System Shock 2, and with some caveats, of course, that were put out there. Mm-hmm. If that applies to you, you know who you are. You know how you play video games. I'm pretty sure we don't have to tell you that. Dave, thank you for stopping by. Behind the scenes, a little behind the curtain talk here. Dave came in last minute. We had someone who had to drop out, unfortunately, and Dave was gracious enough to join us for this. So thank you so much for stopping by and joining us for this. And your time's a premium. And we had I would say a Tales from the Backlog length episode today. Your episodes have been getting shorter, and generally ours have been longer. But once again, thanks.
Oh, there's some long ones coming down the pipeline. So don't get used to the sub 2 hour episodes, Chris. But thank you guys for the invite back on. It's when I got the invitation to come back, it's a no brainer. You know, if I have the free time is yours. I always enjoy coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much. Definitely appreciate that. With that being said, I want you to let people know where they can find you on the interwebs. Where are you from? What you got? What kind of things do you want people to check out?
Yeah. So thank you. I do 2 podcasts because I'm an idiot. The first one is called Tales from the Backlog, and it maps on to Retro Hangover pretty well. Every week is a deep dive analysis of a different game. And so System Shock 2 is going to be on the schedule in December. So if you want to hear me talk about System Shock 2 for another 2 hours, you know where to find that. But there's a bunch of other games on Tales from the Backlog too. I've got about 140 episodes out at the time of recording. So each episode we break down a game. It's always me with different guests. And the thing about the show is we go no spoilers for a while. we basically talk about as much as we can without spoiling the story. Then we warn you, spoilers are coming. You can leave, you can put the podcast on pause and come back 2 years later. It'll still be there. And then after that point, we do a story discussion, anything we've been holding back as far as spoilers go. Chris was tested on this policy the first time he came on the show when we talked about Spec Ops: The Line, which was a real challenge, but we did it. And that was a really good conversation. And then I put Shane and Chris to the test when we did our Signalis episode, which was another one where there's so many fun theories about what's going on in the story of that, but we did the no spoiler thing for people who didn't want to be spoiled. And then after that, we went Pepe Sylvia mode and shared our theories. And it was a great time. So those are 2 episodes that you can check out if you want the Retro Hangover folks on Tales from the Backlog. Chris was also recently on for a Final Fantasy IV episode as well with Jenny E., a mutual friend of both of our shows.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I also have another podcast. It's an easier pitch. It's called a Top 3 podcast, and we do top 3 lists. And we do comedy drafts of topics, and we recast movies with stupid actors. And it's a comedy show. It's me and my high school friends. We do our top 3 topics and stuff like that, but it's a very different vibe, and I have fun doing it for that reason. So those are both of my shows. You can find them anywhere you got podcasts. You can find me on you can find me on Twitter. I'm still there at Real Dave Jackson, and I'll be in the Retro Hangover Discord as well.
All right. Once again, thanks, Dave. Go check out Tales from the Backlog and the Top 3 podcast. And just don't check out the episodes that we're on. Go check out all of them.
Yeah.
They're all a good time. All right, Shane,
right.
That means there it is.
There it is. He didn't expect
audio
me to
delay.
just jump in right there. Yeah, no, it's great. I'm sure Ashton has a great time with these all the time.
I'm sure he loves
you.
it.
Thank you. All right. So, hey, listener, you made it through, what the fuck? What are we at? 2 hour, it's almost 2 hours and 40 minutes. This another chonky boy. So, hey, hopefully you enjoyed the time. I mean, if you're still here, you either fast forwarded through a bunch of shit or I don't know, you are in for the long haul, in which case we appreciate that. If this happens to be your first foray into the RHP-averse, well, then you are in luck because, boy, howdy, do we have so much stuff. There's so many things for you to listen to. So you should check out the rest of our backlog because it is sizable, one might say, and it grows every week, and it will continue to do so like the hive mind. Like the many, it will consume all eventually. So, get in while the getting's good and become one. And we make it easy for you to find all of our stuff. It's in one place. It's a link tree. Go to linktree/retro hangover. It's linktr.ee/retro hangover. You can find this here main feed. You can find our Patreon and our merch store if you'd like to support the show that way. We also have the Discord that Dave mentioned. That is public, open, and free. So there's honestly no reason for you not to join us. There's some great discussions going on in there all the time, as well as our high score challenges and our retro hangover review crew, which is like the book club for video games. Bunch of really neat stuff. Music share if you want to inflict upon other people your music tastes like I do. So many things that you can do. So please check all of that out. We also occasionally, regularly, one might say, much like Metamucil, show up once a week to moonlight as streamers. One day we may too become ninja or something like that. I don't know. But what Chris, what do we attempt to do over there? What can the people see?
Well, if you head over to YouTube or twitch.tv/retro hangover and you check out our stuff, you can watch us play video games poorly at Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern time. And we were talking about growing at some point. So I guess my inappropriate question for the day is, are you a grower or a shower? I think these are the things that you need to ask yourself. And if this does not apply to you, because there's nothing to grow, as the euphemism might apply. You know what? I can't think of something really appropriate to say.
It's like Chris has painted himself into a PC corner now.
Are you a squirter? So are you a grower, a shower, or a squirter?
Those are the options.
There you go.
There are 3 types of people in this world.
So no is also an option. You can also say no, and that everything is acceptable. I will not judge you, but you can let us know what the answer to that question is, or don't. Maybe you don't want people knowing the answer to that question. I don't think I would answer that. I just want to know I don't want to know your answers. I'm just letting you know it's an option. If you head over to a stream at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Sundays over on YouTube or Twitch, and you can find those links over at the link tree. I don't know why I asked these questions because I really don't want the answers to them, but I feel like they're appropriate to put here because I really do want to see who sticks around to the end. And some of I know some of you do. You crazy motherfuckers, and I love you for it. But yeah, just let us know what makes your pocket rocket.
I am constantly struggling to figure out how to segue from these, so I won't, and I will just go ahead and pull the old non sequitur and say, well, there we go, that's it. Here we are. This is the end of the show, and so until next time.
Play with your Shodan Red Rocket joysticks.
Shane here with a quick message. You know, the one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this. It has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee. And Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in head first with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.